Robert was sweet while we were dating, but he changed drastically after we got married. He constantly brags about working at a top-tier company and lords it over me and the kids every day. I wanted to continue working after getting married, but Robert and his father John ordered me to quit, so I reluctantly became a housewife. One evening, Robert looked at me and laughed. "You've aged, haven't you? You were somewhat better when we got married. Being the housewife and goofing off has made you age even faster. Using the kids as an excuse to be lazy, it's only natural you become worthless as a person. I've had enough. Let's get a divorce," I blurted out. Robert gave a sleazy grin. "Raise the 4 kids on your own. I won't help you at all." I almost laughed. Had he ever helped before? Thinking about being rid of the noisy bunch made me feel refreshed. I'll get the divorce papers from City Hall and slam them on him. "You can say whatever you want for now. Enjoy it while it lasts." I'm Scarlet, a 50-year-old housewife. I met Robert through my parents and married him 30 years ago. His verbal abuse has worsened over the years, becoming a constant headache. It wasn't like this when we were dating. Robert, who graduated from college and works for a top-tier company, often talked about his job during dates. I didn't understand all the jargon, but I thought he was serious and passionate about his work. Having lost my dad in childhood and seen my mom struggle, I wanted to marry Robert, who had a stable job, to give her peace of mind. Growing up without my mom around was hard for me. In contrast, Robert was raised by his dad after his parents divorced when he was a teenager. Not knowing my own dad, I was thrilled to have someone I could call dad, even if we weren't blood related. I hoped we could get along like a real father and daughter, but that hope was quickly dashed. After getting married, I found out that Robert was completely under John's thumb. Many of Robert's relatives are not salaried workers but run their own businesses or restaurants, and John also started his own business. Robert deeply respected John. I got into a famous university and joined a company because I followed Dad's advice. He often said proudly, "Since the divorce from Mom, Dad raised me while expanding his company. He's an amazing man." "Yes, he is," I'd say, not knowing how to respond. "I'll make sure my son studies hard and gets into my alma mater's high school and college." I worked in Dad's company for a while but had to change jobs due to an injury, causing trouble for Dad. So, if I have a son, I plan to make him the successor to Dad's company. That's thinking too far ahead, especially when I wasn't even pregnant yet. Before we had kids, I could listen to him and laugh it off. But after giving birth to girls in succession, Robert and John gradually started to treat me coldly. When our 3rd daughter was born, John visited the hospital room, looked disdainfully at the baby sleeping in the bed, and clicked his tongue. "Another girl, hey? Robert, you've got a failure for a wife." "I'm sorry, Dad," Robert said. "Scarlet, if the next one's a girl too, we're getting a divorce. A wife who can't produce an heir is useless to us." Exhausted in bed after a difficult birth, I couldn't stop crying at their cruel words. The thought of divorce crossed my mind then. Later, when our son Thomas was born, John doted on him. Robert, John, and Thomas would go out to see animated movies, buy toys, and John would give Thomas an allowance, leaving Thomas confused and the daughters complaining to me about John. Every time I slightly burnt the food or a speck of dust fell after cleaning, Robert dramatically lamented and mocked me. "If this were your job, you'd be fired immediately." It must be nice for women to be supported by their husbands and laze around at home all day. I wish I could just play with the kids and slack off every day too. Hearing this always made me angry. I had wanted to continue working, but right after getting married, Robert and John ordered me to quit my job. "Are you sure you can handle your duties as a wife perfectly if you're going to slack off? Quit your office job," Robert said. John added, "That's right. You have to take care of him and do the housework perfectly. You don't need to work. His salary is enough to live on." I was appalled by their outdated attitudes but didn't want to argue with my husband or John as a newlywed, so I obediently complied. After Thomas started elementary school, I tried to re-enter the workforce as a full-time employee but was rejected everywhere. The reason was always the same. Having 4 children, they assumed I'd likely take time off for sickness or other issues. Reluctantly, I became a housewife and Robert treated me like a servant, constantly finding faults and criticizing me as a useless housewife. He used his busy job as an excuse to dump all household chores and parenting on me. I didn't mind handling the housework since I was a housewife, but whether I was sick or sleep-deprived after childbirth, he acted as if it had nothing to do with him, showing no support at all. Recently, I've been sleep deprived because of the baby's night cries. Robert, you're off tomorrow, right? Could you take care of the child for one night? Ha! I finally get a day off. Don't ruin my precious holiday. Taking care of the baby is a mom's job. You can at least handle that much. When I was at my limit after days of only 2 hours of sleep and asked Robert, who was laughing loudly at a video with a beer in hand, for help, he yelled at me. Another day, when I wanted to consult about the kids, he said, "You're an adult. Think and decide for yourself. You're a veteran, having raised 3 already. Don't rely on others." If he came home to find children's toys scattered on the floor, he'd immediately get in a bad mood. When I'm tired and come home to see the house in a mess, I lose the will to come home. You've been home all day, right? It should be clean. I'm sorry, Thomas was crying, and it was hard to prepare dinner. I'll clean it up now, I said as I gathered the toys. Robert's sarcasm rained down on me. Thomas is spoiled because you're not strict enough. You're a failure. This makes you unqualified as a mom. Spoiled. I wondered. Thomas was only 5. It's natural for him to assert himself, but such comments felt like a stab in the heart. Hey, don't look so glum. It ruins the meal. It's annoying, so go to another room with the kids. Robert waved me away. Our eldest daughter, Madison, glared at him. Dad, why say that when you're eating the meal Mom made? What did you say? A girl talking back to her dad? If you're going to complain, then leave. Madison, don't say such things to Dad. Let's go upstairs. I calmed Madison down and took the younger kids upstairs. Once we were in our room, Madison burst out. Why do you stay silent, Mom? You should talk back to Dad. Doesn't it make you angry being told such things? Why not just divorce? I'd love to, but divorcing with 4 kids requires a lot of courage. I'll earn part-time money when I'm in high school. Isn't that enough? I smiled weakly at Madison. Thank you. I appreciate the thought. As I gently stroked Madison's head, she fell silent. Madison, a middle schooler, seemed to feel that her parents' relationship was beyond repair, so on days she had no plans, she'd actively take care of her younger siblings. I wished Robert, as their dad, would interact more with the kids, but he always treated them as nuisances and a source of his stress. On weekends, when the kids made noise, he'd complain and order me to take them somewhere. My head hurts. I feel sick. Despite disliking children, when we visited the in-laws' house, he pretended to dote on Thomas to show John how much he valued the pair, which was hypocritical. One weekend, Robert got up past noon and seeing me eating lunch with the kids, announced, "You see I'm tired, right? Take the kids somewhere. I'm going out for drinks with a junior from work in the evening, so you can come back by then." All right, by the way, our living expenses have been cut back this past year. Can we return to the original amount? I asked timidly. Robert's eyes narrowed. You can manage with $300 for food and living expenses. As a housewife, you should be able to budget better. Can't you do that without a college education? $300 is impossible. Your salary must have increased with all the overtime and weekend work, right? Why are the living expenses being reduced? When I questioned him, Robert became furious. Shut up. How I spend my salary is my business. How dare a housewife argue with me? Who do you think provides for this lifestyle? I gave up arguing with Robert. I couldn't rely on him anymore. While the kids were at school, I studied, earned qualifications, and secretly started working remotely. One evening, after a while, Robert came home reeking of alcohol and laughed when he saw me. I thought you were some old lady, but what a surprise. You're Scarlet. Welcome home. You've drunk too much. Just leave me alone. But you've really aged. You used to look a bit better when we got married. I was furious. Due to the reduced living expenses, I had to switch to cheaper cosmetics and hadn't bought any new clothes in a year. Meanwhile, he frequently bought new suits and ties, went out drinking every night under the pretense of treating his subordinates, and purchased brand-name shoes and watches. With a trembling voice, I clenched my fists and retorted, I want to dress up beautifully too, but you're the one not giving me any money, Robert. Don't blame others. It's because you're lazing around as a housewife that you age faster, Robert mocked loudly, always sleeping, lacking a sense of urgency, using the kids as an excuse to be lazy. No wonder you're failing as a person. Dizziness hit me from the anger. Who was it that ordered me to become a housewife despite wanting to continue working? I've had enough. Let's get a divorce, I blurted out. Robert's face showed a moment of surprise, but he quickly smirked. Fine by me. I'm tired of seeing your gloomy face anyway, he agreed easily. But raise the 4 kids on your own. I won't help you at all. I almost laughed. Had he ever helped before? It had always been just me raising all 4. Thinking of getting rid of the noisy bunch felt refreshing. Too absurd to respond, I headed for the entrance. I'll get the divorce papers from the city hall and slam them on him, I thought, turning my back to Robert. I smirked defiantly. You can say whatever you want for now. Enjoy it while it lasts. When I handed the signed divorce papers to Robert, he took them with a half smile. Are you sure? Don't come crying to me with regrets. Can you manage with 4 kids? You've been living off of me. As I urged the kids and packed up for the move, he lounged on the sofa, taunting in a mocking tone. Your mom says she works, but it'll be tough for an old lady to support all 5 of you. Ready for a poor life together. Even if you try to work, you'll get rejected because of the kids. Actually, I've started remote work. I have savings from before we were married, and we can manage if we don't live luxuriously. What? If you started working, why didn't you tell me? You were always too tired or telling me to take the kids somewhere because we were too noisy. You never listened to me properly. Well, whatever. Your salary is probably way less than mine. Don't beg me for help. Ignoring Robert's sarcasm, I silently packed our belongings into cardboard boxes. The movers will come in 3 days to pick up our stuff, so leave it as is. Please take care of the divorce papers. Got it. Do whatever you want. I called the movers, took only the essentials and valuables, and drove to my parents' house. I planned to stay there for a while and look for a new place once things settled down. I briefly explained the divorce to the kids while packing, but in the car, I went over the situation again. Sorry it's so sudden, but we'll be transferring to a new school starting next week. I'm sorry, everyone. Yay, I love Grandma, so I'm excited. It's not far by bus. We can still play with our friends, so it's all good. The kids tried to cheer me up by acting excited, nearly making me tear up. Won't you miss living with Dad, Thomas? Not really. Dad doesn't like us, right? Thomas pouted. He always yells that we're noisy or annoying. When he's home on the weekends, he doesn't play with us or listen to us. I didn't like being around him. Right, we all felt that way, Mom. The kids' agreement filled me with regret. I should have made the decision to divorce sooner. When I called my mom to explain, she was surprised and saddened. Robert always played the good husband and dad when we visited my parents for Christmas, so my mom thought we were happy together. She was heartbroken by the news. After the kids went to bed at my parents' house, my mom told me, Scarlet, you can stay here as long as you like. We'll manage the living expenses somehow. Thank you, but I'll be okay. Could you introduce me to a lawyer, though? Of course, but you'll have to wait a bit since I'm fully booked right now. Let me know if there's anything you need help with, okay? Understood, I replied. My mom's strong words resonated with me. 6 months after the divorce, my children and I were starting to adjust to our new environment. As I returned home from shopping, I found Robert standing in front of the gate. His hair, now mixed with gray, was unkempt, and dark circles under his eyes made him seem utterly disheveled. He lunged at me as soon as he saw me with my bag, but I coldly shrugged him off. Who are you? Come on, don't be like that. I'm your master. I don't have a master. What does my ex-husband want at my parents' house? I asked, pushing him away. Robert began to rant in a near frenzy. I was suddenly kicked out of the house. What's going on? It wasn't sudden. You must have received several notices about paying the rent, right? If you ignore them, getting kicked out is inevitable. Why should I pay? Because you are the tenant. Hearing the commotion, a middle-aged woman from the neighboring house peeked out of her front door. Scarlet, what's happening? Should I call the police? No, it's okay. It's just my ex-husband who has come over. The woman glanced at Robert and frowned. Ah, that one. Scarlet, let me know if you need anything. With that, she disappeared back into her house. What have you been telling people about me? Let's go inside. We're causing a disturbance. Ignoring his question, I led Robert into the house. As soon as we were inside, Robert sprawled on the living room sofa and downed the coffee I offered before returning to the topic. That house was bought by your mom, wasn't it? Yes, but the deed was in your name, Robert. You were too proud to have it in your wife's name, saying it would be embarrassing. Robert seemed to remember, tilting his head as if to say, That's right. But back then, you were just a regular employee without enough money to pay the mortgage, so my mom used to transfer money into the account every month. Oh, that's right. Then stopping the transfer suddenly would be a problem for me, wouldn't it? You're dumb. Can't you understand that? I sighed, holding my forehead. Who's the dumb one here? Who in the world keeps paying their daughter's ex-husband's mortgage? Robert frowned. Your mom's rich, right? If she has money, she could have continued paying. It's unfair. Families should help each other in times of need. Who was it that told me not to rely on others when I needed help with child care? And aren't you a senior manager at a large company? Why are you so broke? Pressing him, Robert became flustered and replied, You know why. I was treating my subordinates. It's an important duty of a superior. At the expense of our household budget, the time you reduce our living expenses coincides with when you started working overtime and on weekends. Robert's face stiffened at my observation. I had to maintain communication and motivate them to work harder because of the increased workload, Robert explained. Oh, I see. So you're kind to subordinates but cold to your own children and wife. Subordinates are different, they're endearing. Ah, I see. How about this suggestion? If you're kicked out, why not stay in a business hotel? I got some hotel vouchers from a friend of my mom's who runs one. Robert's eyes widened. Really? You give that to me? I have plenty, so I don't mind sharing a few. You do have your generous moments. I'll be sorted by this weekend, so that'll do. Handing over the hotel vouchers I received from my mom, Robert left in a good mood. Everything seemed set. On the weekend evening, while watching animal videos with the kids in the living room, the doorbell rang. At the door were Robert and John. I swallowed my surprise as they barged into the living room. John surveyed the relaxing children and bellowed, Watch such nonsense. That's why you're all so childish. The pleasant atmosphere of our weekend shattered, and the kids teared up from John's thunderous scolding. Then John turned his anger towards Robert. Robert, are you really leaving Thomas with this woman? What about the talks of him being the heir? I want her to struggle raising 4 kids on her own to make her realize how much she depended on my earnings, Robert declared arrogantly. If you want an heir, I should marry a younger, more obedient wife and have new children. I guess you're right. Find a new wife quickly. Their conversation made me feel sick. As always, they only saw a wife as a tool for producing children. Are you too daft? Robert flashed a malicious smile. We've come to demand compensation. What? Neglecting your husband's care while fussing over the children is a grave sin. You and the kids made it impossible for me to relax on weekends, causing me stress. So I'm claiming $10,000 for nuisance fees. I agree with Robert. A wife should prioritize her husband over the children. Neglecting the husband's care shows a lack of awareness as a wife. It took me a while to grasp Robert's words. I thought they were joking, but seeing John's intimidating presence, it seemed they were serious. A headache began to form. I wanted to commend myself for enduring years with such a person. As I pondered how to respond, Mom appeared at the open living room door. What a lively scene, she spoke in a calm tone. A man in a suit stood behind her. As planned, Mom had brought a lawyer. Relieved, I glanced at John, who had turned pale and was trembling. The once aggressive man seemed entirely different. Hello, Scarlet's mom. Dad, please explain the situation. Robert, too, seemed taken aback by John's sudden change. Regaining my composure with the appearance of allies, I left the room, fetched a large envelope from the bedroom, and returned to the living room after sending the kids upstairs with Madison. Leaving only adults, I laid out the contents of the envelope on the living room table. Mom, you finally got the lawyer's time. I'm sorry for the wait. Since your husband is here, may we discuss the compensation and child support claims now? Compensation. Robert looked puzzled, and I explained. Since you stayed in the hotel we specified, it was easy for the detective to gather evidence. You were even caught getting cozy in the car, resulting in many shots together. As I spread out the photos proving his infidelity, Robert was speechless. Eventually, he snapped back to reality and exploded. You had me stay at that hotel just to have a detective follow me? That's despicable. I don't want to hear that from someone who's been cheating for over a year. I also laid out the joint debit card statement on the table, showing shocking spending of over $10,000 on his mistress. You were stingy with the household expenses, telling me to respect you as a corporate executive. Yet as a father and husband, you're the worst. John spoke softly after a silence. So it wasn't you, but Robert who was having the affair. That's right, she's making a big fuss over a mere affair. Truly a worthless wife, Robert retorted carelessly. John glared sharply at Robert. You damn liar. John suddenly exploded, and I tentatively asked, What did you hear, John? Jane explained with a displeased look. Robert told me that you were the one cheating, neglecting the kids and housework, dumping everything onto him. He also told me how you threatened to take the kids and leave, and he came to ask me for help. What? That's all lies. Would you like to hear the recordings of Robert with his mistress or the verbal abuse towards me and the kids? No, I'd rather not. Just like your mother, you're hopeless, John muttered irritably. After a moment of contemplation, he abruptly apologized deeply in front of me and my mom. Scarlet, I apologize for not investigating thoroughly and believing my idiot son's story. Please forgive me. Why the hell are you apologizing to them, Dad? Apologizing to women is shameful. Stop it, Robert said discontentedly, to which John hurriedly explained. Listen, you should apologize sincerely too. Scarlet's mom is a great benefactor to our family. Didn't you hear from your brother last year? His company was about to go under. I think I heard something about that. Scarlet's mom bought his company last year and became the new president. Thanks to her, the business was turned around. If she pulls her investment now, even our group company will be hit hard. Upon hearing John's words, Robert seemed to finally grasp the situation. His defiant demeanor shifted to one of panic, and he knelt beside John, crying like a child. I'm so sorry. It's all right, I wouldn't ruin your uncle's company over something like this. But Robert, you need to take responsibility, Mom said with an angelic smile. The mistress was your subordinate. I know the president of Robert's company. I've informed them about what happened. Starting next week, you're being relocated to a remote island. Such a shame just after you worked so hard to become a manager. But well, do your best at your new job. Robert, looking up, began to cry. It was his own fault. I felt refreshed, looking down at Robert. Later, with the lawyer present, we proceeded with the divorce formalities. A completely deflated Robert agreed to pay in full the compensation and the misuse savings from our joint account that I had demanded. Mom, as she declared, informed Robert's boss about the affair through a mutual acquaintance. The boss, being a devoted husband, was furious. Robert's mistress resigned voluntarily, and Robert was sent to a branch on a remote island. Demanding and receiving compensation from the mistress in a lump sum, I learned that Robert had fallen from his elite path. The mistress quickly dumped him, bound to start over. Robert, however, faced ridicule for the reason behind his demotion and, feeling unbearable, quit the company. Burdened with a huge debt from repaying me in monthly child support payments, Robert was working multiple part-time jobs from morning till night. Estranged by John, he was living a lonely life in a dim apartment. Meanwhile, John, having injured my mom, faced cold treatment from relatives. After employees complained about his tyrannical behavior, his company faced a strike, leading to its collapse. Now he's working part-time at a restaurant, berated by a younger manager. While Robert was preoccupied with his affair, I saved money through remote work and bought a second-hand house. Moving in with my children, I found the memories too unpleasant and had no intention of returning. The children, now free from Robert and John, were noticeably happier and more comfortable. On long weekends, we visited my mom's house, enjoying cooking and chatting together, which became our latest pleasure. I plan to continue remote work and once Thomas is a bit older, look for a full-time job again. With occasional support from my mom, I want to live happily with my 4 children.
Hello, I am a single woman in my 60s. Since childhood, I held on to the belief in a reciprocal philosophy, thinking that my hard work and dedication would be met with equal effort in return. This mindset extended to my relationships, where I believed treating others kindly would result in receiving kindness in return. Even after marriage, I continued to hold this belief, assuming that by being considerate to my husband, he would reciprocate. In today's world, women aren't expected to sacrifice as much, but during my era, societal expectations were different. I willingly made sacrifices for my husband and children, confident that my efforts would contribute to future happiness. However, my marriage and family life didn't unfold as expected. Despite my early mornings and diligent work for the family, complaints and mistakes overshadowed appreciation. At that time, no one mandated that I live this way. I was an ordinary person who married a coworker 4 years my senior due to societal expectations. Despite the societal norms for married women to quit their jobs, I became a full-time housewife after giving birth to my daughter. I had no regrets. I believed it was a natural course of action for family life. Though my life wasn't glamorous like TV dramas, it felt easy and stable. Around my daughter's 9th grade, tragedy struck when my mother passed away suddenly from a heart attack. While mourning her loss, I discovered my husband's affair. In the midst of my grief, he found joy elsewhere, becoming uncaring and eventually demanding a divorce. Despite my determination to avoid divorce, my husband's behavior became unbearable. Divorce wasn't as socially acceptable back then, and despite an irresponsible and unkind husband, I resisted the idea. Looking back, I realized my naivety, but more was at stake. My daughter, witnessing the turmoil, felt the impact. Despite my refusal to divorce, I found myself in a deeply miserable situation. During a heated argument about our impending divorce, my father unexpectedly visited. Witnessing the distress in our relationship, he offered me a place to live and encouraged me to leave my husband, taking my daughter with me. Having recently lost his wife and observed his daughter in an unhappy marriage, my father convinced me that persisting in such a difficult situation was futile. Feeling the weight of his concern, I yielded to my husband's request for a divorce. In return, my husband provided me with $3,000 in cash. With my father's support, I secured a 2-bedroom townhouse to live in with my daughter, starting anew. I anticipated the need to work hard to support my daughter, fearing judgment from society for being a divorced woman with a daughter. This concern was particularly heightened as my daughter entered adolescence. During this challenging period, my daughter expressed typical desires of her age, lamenting the perceived consequences of her parents' divorce. Despite the emotional hurt, I knew I couldn't dwell on them forever, determined to provide for my daughter. I embarked on the journey of seeking stable employment. However, being an older divorced woman with a child made securing a job challenging. Undeterred, I took on multiple part-time and nighttime jobs, even engaging in freelance work at home whenever possible. As time passed, my daughter advanced to her senior year of high school. Despite financial constraints, she excelled academically, finding her own way to thrive. Motivated by my desire to ensure her future, I secured a job at a 24-hour restaurant, working 12-hour shifts. 2/3 of my earnings were diligently saved for her college tuition. Despite facing judgment and gossip, especially from some married men who viewed me as an easy target, I persevered for the sake of my daughter. The sacrifices were numerous, but my goal was to provide her with opportunities I never had. As she approached adulthood, I hoped she would understand the struggles I faced in raising her and making a living. Reflecting on these challenges, I realized that having a daughter made my situation both more arduous and meaningful. She became my anchor, giving me the strength to endure and persevere through life's challenges. I held on to the belief that, in the future, my grown daughter and I would share stories about the hardships we faced and take pride in our resilience. A year later, my daughter's outstanding performance in the SAT exams earned her admission to Harvard University, a moment of immense joy that made all the previous struggles worthwhile. As she embarked on her college journey, I felt a mix of pride and emptiness. Though I had managed to provide for her education and housing, the absence of her daily presence at home left a void. We maintained close contact through phone calls, and during the initial months of her independence, our bond deepened. Her newfound affection and connection were a source of comfort, and I cherished our evolving relationship. Despite the challenges, my daughter graduated from college without financial setbacks, fulfilling a dream we had worked hard to achieve. Anticipating that we could live together again, I was surprised when she secured a job at a defense corporation and chose to live independently. To support her, I took a bank loan and contributed to the down payment for a condo near her workplace. While I aged and embraced a more unassuming appearance, my daughter thrived as a fashionable career woman. Witnessing her success brought immense happiness, reinforcing the idea that my sacrifices had borne fruit. I found contentment in her achievements, understanding the sentiment of people who say they forget hunger in moments of joy. Despite the financial support throughout her college years, the prospect of her wedding became a new financial responsibility. People questioned why I continued to struggle when my daughter was capable of self-sufficiency. However, I was determined to contribute to her wedding expenses to prevent any condescension from her future in-laws. The belief that sacrificing for her happiness would bring joy to both of us fueled my resilience. On the other hand, as my daughter dated, I noticed a growing distance between us. Initially hurt, I recognized that her adult life and relationships rightfully took precedence. I patiently waited for her to mature and open up to me, understanding that priorities shift during this phase of life. However, on her 27th birthday, I looked forward to celebrating with her. Yet she made it clear that she had plans with someone named Michael and dismissed any preparations. While she may have intended to convey that I needn't go to any trouble, I couldn't help but feel hurt. It was her birthday, a day that held immense significance for me as the day she was born, and her apparent indifference stung deeply. It was challenging to comprehend why my daughter considered spending money on her birthday a waste, given the tight budget. Despite her intelligence, her understanding of her own mother seemed distant. Despite my hurt feelings, I understood she was my only daughter, and I wanted to see her briefly on her birthday, even if it meant taking a day off work. On that day, I meticulously paid attention to my appearance before going to her workplace. However, what awaited me was an unexpected and emotionally charged encounter in the company lobby. I saw my ex-husband with his mistress, individuals I never wished to see again. Doubting how he found out and came there, I frantically called my daughter, only to be abruptly hung up on as she claimed to be busy with a meeting. Feeling dumbfounded, I turned around, only to hear my daughter happily calling her dad and embracing him with a bright smile. Her boyfriend seemed familiar with my ex-husband and his wife, adding to my fury. In that moment, I felt betrayed, as if the whole world conspired against me. Drained of meaning, I hastily left the scene. Reflecting on that day, I felt the desire to confront my daughter and ex-husband, but an overwhelming urge to escape prevailed. Despite my inner turmoil, I couldn't muster the courage to call my daughter. Unexpectedly, my daughter showed up at home one day, announcing her decision to get married and handing me an invitation card. The surprise turned into shock when I saw the names on the card. Although she was my daughter, I felt an intense urge to throw her out of the house. I questioned how she, my own daughter, could present such an invitation. I confronted her, expressing my hurt at being treated like a guest at her wedding, emphasizing my role as her mother. In response, my daughter apologized, stating she felt she had no choice. Despite her desire to marry Michael, she faced scrutiny from his parents over every detail about her. The situation left me grappling with complex emotions, torn between hurt and the desire to understand my daughter's perspective on her life-changing decision. The revelation from my daughter about her concerns regarding my divorced past and the challenges of being a single mother struck me deeply. She explained that revealing this truth could jeopardize her chances of marrying her boyfriend, as her potential in-laws might disapprove. In the face of this revelation, I couldn't help but express my frustration, reminding her of the sacrifices and struggles I endured to raise her, work at a restaurant, and fund her education. My daughter's response. However, her response stunned me. She dismissed the past, stating that her father and his new partner, the woman who played a role in breaking our family, had already met with her future in-laws. In her perspective, the present was what mattered most, and she prioritized her desire for a comfortable life over the difficulties we faced before. Feeling hurt and regretful, I spoke harshly to her for the first time in my life, expressing my disappointment in her attitude. In turn, she suggested that if I wanted to drop her from my life, I should repay her for the money I spent raising her. This exchange led to a heated argument, and she left my house in anger, proclaiming that we were now strangers. Devastated by the turn of events, I questioned the purpose of saving money for her wedding and felt a deep sadness when I looked at the wedding invitation she had left behind, with a different name printed where mine should have been. 3 years later, I received news that my father, who had been living independently to avoid burdening me, had fallen ill. Sadly, I learned about his condition only after his passing. The realization of being a poor daughter to him hit me hard. A few months later, I inherited a small condo where he had lived, a bittersweet reminder of the family ties and struggles that shaped my life. Upon realizing that I had money saved from my daughter's wedding in the savings account, I decided it was time to live for myself, even if it seemed somewhat late in life. I pondered the idea that in today's world, trusting only one child and sacrificing for them might not be the most fulfilling path. It was a realization that I should prioritize my own desires and needs before it became too late for me to enjoy life. As I contemplated this shift in perspective, a real estate broker and close friend from the restaurant where I worked suggested that I consider what I truly wanted to do. Despite societal expectations for women to sacrifice, I felt the desire to break free from that mold and live for myself. I harbored a feeling of regret and sorrow for the sacrifices I made over the years, and I yearned to pursue personal fulfillment. Inspired by my friend, I embarked on studying the real estate business and even delved into auction biddings. With some savings and money from selling my late father's condo, I seized the opportunity to take on a new challenge. In the surprising turn of events, I became a building owner overnight, residing in a prime location. 6 months later, after returning from a mountain climbing adventure, I found myself on the top floor of my building, now transformed into my home. Unexpectedly, someone knocked on my door, and I debated whether to pretend not to be home due to fatigue. However, curiosity prevailed, and I opened the door to find my pregnant daughter with a chubby-cheeked toddler in her arms. Tearful and distressed, she explained that she had been deceived by her husband, who turned violent and had affairs. Faced with impending childbirth and raising her young daughter, she sought refuge with me, despite my initial shock and the lingering hurt from our previous arguments. I couldn't turn my back on my daughter in need. She revealed that she had heard about my newfound success in real estate and wanted assistance. Despite the painful history between us, she pleaded for help, pointing out that she had a share in the money I had acquired from my wedding savings and inheritance. Caught between anger and compassion, I couldn't deny my daughter's plea for help. Despite her past actions, I recognized the vulnerability in her situation and knew that as a mother, I couldn't turn her away. The complexities of our relationship resurfaced, prompting me to grapple with the tangled emotions of love, disappointment, and the inevitability of family ties. I confronted her, saying, "I was the one who saved money for your education and your wedding, but you told me to get out of your life. Do I need to give you money now?" I only said that, but I didn't get any money back from you. It seems that in front of money, there is no use for the bond between a parent and a child. Now that you have money, you don't need a daughter, right? No matter what, I am still your daughter, so I have a right to your money too. I was once very proud of you, thinking that it was because of me that you were able to attend Harvard. But now I see that it was all in vain. I guess I was too busy making a living that I couldn't teach you to be a decent human being. I raised you as someone who is so selfish and can only think of yourself. I don't plan to give you one penny, so you can either go back to your husband or your wonderful father. You are too mean. Could you abandon your own daughter? Do you think other people would care for me at all? That wife already ran off with the money, and he has disappeared trying to look for her. If you abandon me, I'll become an orphan. Now I have a child and I'm pregnant, so how could you be so mean to me? Would you be happy if I died like that? When she screamed at me, I couldn't put up with her any longer, so I took out all the money I had in my wallet and threw it at her. Since you are acting so pathetic, I'll give you that. However, never come back to my house because I won't let you in. There's something that I learned in the meantime, just that your life is important. Now my life is important. You cannot put me in and out of your life at your whim. I coldly let my daughter and her child out of my house. Of course, I would not feel good about it since she was my daughter after all. However, I couldn't accept her because she still was as selfish as before, and I couldn't bury the past. However, I felt sorry for my little granddaughter, who was innocent and got kicked out together with her mom. After that, my daughter was too proud and never came to see me again. To be honest, I knew that she was such a daughter. So, has she repented for her past acts and begged me for forgiveness out of a quest? Pretending I was reluctant, but would have found ways to punish her wayward husband. But I was so disappointed that if she erased me from her life to marry her husband, she should have lived happily. Why did my husband and my daughter turn out that way, even though I lived a hard life? Now I see that the only person who is living a life the way I want to is only me alone. Thus, if anyone is living a life like I did on behalf of others, I want to say this one thing for sure. No matter how strong your relationship is with another person, be sure to take care of your life first. Even if everyone in this world betrays you, you will not betray yourself. In the end, happiness is not what you do for others, but what you do for yourself. I want to give that message through my story here. Even though it may seem like a life that's only felt half, I plan to try to fill that remaining half from now on for complete happiness. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope all goes well for you today, and good fortune will be with you. Please cheer for me and write your comments of wisdom in the comments section. Pressing like and subscribing is a big help to me. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Hello, everyone. My name is Betty, and I'd like to share a personal story with you. My mother-in-law, Madison, wasn't always the superficial and self-centered person she appears to be today. According to my husband, Edward, her transformation occurred later in life. Edward grew up in humble circumstances. His world changed drastically when he lost his father at the age of 5, leaving Madison to become the sole provider. Despite the challenges, she rose to the occasion, ensuring they had a stable, albeit modest, life. This resilience makes her current behavior even more striking. Through sheer determination and brilliance, Edward earned a full scholarship to medical school and eventually became a respected doctor. Despite his professional success, he remains grounded, a trait I deeply admire. However, Madison's lifestyle shifted dramatically after Edward's career took off. She embraced luxury, a far cry from the humble life they once shared. To give some context about myself, I'm not currently employed, though I will explain why later. However, this does not mean I am financially unstable or reliant on others. Unfortunately, my first meeting with Madison got off to a rocky start due to her harsh misjudgment of my appearance and demeanor. When we met, her reaction was anything but welcoming. "Edward, is this the girl you've been excited about?" she questioned, scrutinizing me. "She looks so ordinary and unremarkable. Why her? Does she even work?" In that moment, Madison unfairly branded me as a potential gold digger, assuming I had ulterior motives for being with Edward. Her comments cut deeply, creating a tense dynamic from the start. Despite Edward's efforts to defend me, the encounter escalated into a heated argument. Eventually, we left, and during the drive home, Edward apologized for his mother's behavior. He admitted she had overstepped her boundaries and tried to reassure me. "She's changed," Edward explained. "She's not the person she used to be. Please don't take her words to heart." Although his words were comforting, the thought of maintaining a relationship with Madison felt daunting. However, as Edward's only remaining parent, I knew cutting ties completely wasn't a practical solution. "I'm not asking you to be friends with her," Edward said gently, "but could you try to be civil?" Reluctantly, I agreed to be respectful, though I doubted Madison would return the favor. "Don't worry, Betty," he reassured me. "If she steps out of line again, we'll reassess how we handle things. I love my mom, but I love you too, and I won't let her mistreat you." Even with Edward's support, I remained uneasy about my relationship with Madison. 4 years later, Edward and I got married in a simple courthouse ceremony, largely due to financial constraints. Edward was still supporting Madison, sending her a significant portion of his income each month for so-called emergencies. This practice continued after our marriage, putting the strain on our own finances. I never interfered with Edward's decision to support his mother, believing it was his right and responsibility. However, Madison's behavior became increasingly problematic. She often spoke negatively about me to her friends, spreading rumors that painted me as a gold digger. At first, I tried to ignore the slander, but it began to damage my reputation. Despite Edward's best efforts to mediate, Madison remained cold and distrustful. She was convinced I wasn't a suitable match for her son and treated me with disdain and suspicion. The ongoing tension made me question how long we could sustain this fragile family dynamic. Then, one day, Edward shared unexpected news. Madison wanted to invite me to a small gathering she was planning. Given her clear dislike for me, I was skeptical of her sudden change of heart. Edward, however, reassured me. She wants to make amends, he said confidently. She's trying to turn over a new leaf. Although I harbored doubts about Madison's intentions, I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. Edward was hopeful this could be a step toward repairing our strained relationship, and I wanted to approach the situation with an open mind. As the party date approached, I waited for more details from Madison with a mixture of eagerness and apprehension. Then the next day, Madison sent me a text. Assuming she was confirming the invitation, I opened it with cautious optimism. Her message began with a casual mention of the venue, a renowned 5-star hotel that was the talk of the town. She described the glamorous event she was hosting for 21 guests, proudly detailing how fabulous it would be. Feeling uncertain, I asked if I was still invited, based on what Edward had told me. Madison's response left me stunned. With an air of arrogance, she clarified that I was not invited. She emphasized the exclusivity of the event, the prestige of her guests, and her family's supposed wealth, making it clear that I wasn't part of her plans. I was humiliated and confused. Edward had been so sure she was extending an olive branch, yet here I was, excluded and belittled. Though hurt, I knew I had to maintain my composure. I calmly responded to Madison, explaining the misunderstanding, but her reply was patronizing. She suggested I couldn't possibly comprehend the complexities of organizing an event of such high caliber. Faced with her disdain, I chose to preserve my dignity, acknowledging her message without engaging further. After Madison's dismissive reply, I made it clear I had no interest in attending the gathering where I wasn't welcome. Rather than soften her tone, Madison doubled down, flaunting her supposed status and exclusivity. Though I felt the strong urge to respond in anger, I decided against it. Instead, I chose not to share the upsetting exchange with Edward and waited for the day of the party to pass. On the day of the event, Madison, seemingly oblivious to the emotional toll her words had caused, sent me a photo of herself and her friends dressed in lavish designer outfits. She later posted boastful updates on social media, highlighting the elegance of their evening. I ignored it all, focusing on my work and patiently waiting to see how things would unfold. About 2 hours later, I received an unexpected call from my father, which brought a surprising twist to the story. Here's something I hadn't shared widely. My father owns the very hotel where Madison was hosting her party, a fact she was unaware of. 4 years ago, I inherited a substantial sum from my grandfather, which I invested in my father's business. As a result, I now receive a share of the profits from the hotel and other family-owned enterprises. Despite my comfortable financial situation, I've always preferred to maintain a low profile, which is why Madison had no idea about my connection to the venue. My father's call revealed another layer of irony. Madison and her friends, oblivious to the high costs associated with such a luxurious venue, had racked up a bill of $4,000. After enjoying their extravagant evening, they requested a 60% discount, claiming they were short on cash. My father, aware of the situation and having heard complaints from staff about Madison's group being rude and entitled, sought my advice on how to handle it. As he described the scenario, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony. Madison, who had used the party to flaunt her supposed superiority, couldn't afford the event she had so proudly hosted. I shared my frustrations with my father, recounting how Madison had demeaned me while unknowingly hosting her event at my family's property. The situation felt like an unexpected poetic form of retribution for her earlier behavior. As my father and I discussed Madison's ostentatious display and the burdens she and her guests had placed on the staff, he fully grasped the irony of the moment. Together, we decided how to address the issue in a way that would both uphold the hotel's policies and serve as a quiet, meaningful lesson for Madison. Half-jokingly, I suggested to my dad that Madison and her entourage could make amends by washing dishes and cleaning the restaurant floors, considering their disrespectful behavior toward the staff. While the idea carried a hint of poetic justice, it also presented an opportunity to teach a lesson in humility and respect. My dad, amused by the suggestion, playfully added that if Madison escalated the matter, involving the authorities was always an option, though we hoped it wouldn't come to that. He chuckled at my suggestion, giving it an enthusiastic endorsement, and even joked about documenting the moment with photos. What started as a fan comment soon turned into reality. About an hour later, my dad sent me pictures of Madison and her friends, visibly humbled, washing dishes and mopping the restaurant floors. When Madison realized my dad was the owner of the hotel, her attitude initially shifted to one of relief, assuming her connection to him would get her out of the predicament. However, to her shock, my dad insisted she and her guests take responsibility for their actions. Temporarily dumbfounded, Madison protested, but my dad reminded her firmly that since she didn't consider me family, she couldn't expect familial courtesies either. The irony of the situation was undeniable. While part of me regretted not witnessing the scene in person, the photos were proof enough of the day's unexpected turn. Later that evening, Edward came home visibly unsettled. It was clear Madison had reached out to him, likely providing a skewed version of the events. He approached me with concern, asking about the claim that his mother had been forced to clean at the restaurant. I knew I needed to tread carefully, balancing my desire for vindication with the importance of preserving my relationship with Edward. Calmly, I explained the situation in full detail, emphasizing that what had happened was a natural consequence of Madison's behavior. I outlined how Madison had come to our family-owned hotel, racked up a $4,000 bill, claimed she could only pay $2,000, and harassed the staff throughout the event. Her ostentatious party had turned into an absolute nightmare for everyone involved, and my dad's actions were entirely justified. Edward, clearly stunned, asked about the details of the gathering, including the guests and what they had ordered. I explained that, contrary to what Madison had told him, she hadn't brought just 5 people. She had brought 21 guests who had indulged in the most expensive items on the menu. Edward was speechless. Madison had not only misled him about the guest list, but she had also lied about inviting me, claiming I had declined. The truth left him grappling with a mix of frustration and disbelief as the dynamics of the situation became clearer to him. I corrected Edward by showing him the text messages from Madison, which clearly demonstrated I was never genuinely invited to her event. At his request, I also provided the restaurant bills and shared the full text exchanges. To substantiate the costs further, my father sent him receipts, and I showed Edward photos of Madison's lavish party. As Edward reviewed the evidence, his initial disbelief turned to anger. Without hesitation, he called Madison to confront her about the glaring discrepancies in her story. Madison attempted to downplay the situation, claiming she had only mentioned being short on cash and accusing me of twisting the story to sabotage her. Edward wasn't buying it. He pointed out the inconsistencies between her words and the evidence and reminded her of the insult she had thrown my way, saying I wasn't classy enough to attend her event. Madison tried to dismiss her remark as a harmless joke, but Edward remained unconvinced. He pressed her on her irresponsible spending, especially since it was coming out of his pocket, and criticized her for insulting his wife while wasting money on her friends. Madison scrambled to justify her actions, but Edward's profound disappointment was unmistakable. "Mom," he said firmly, "I made a mistake by always giving you money whenever you needed it. But guess what? That ends now." Desperate, Madison protested. "Edward, you've been so supportive all this time. You can't just stop now. It was just a one-time mistake. Why are you overreacting?" "No, Mom," Edward retorted, his voice steady with resolve. "This isn't just a one-time mistake. If you can't even consider my wife as family, then I don't want anything to do with you. I always hoped you'd change your attitude, but you haven't. I'm not going to keep funding your lifestyle while you insult my wife and call her classless. This ends now." Edward didn't wait for a response. He hung up, blocked her number, and turned to me, his demeanor softening. He apologized profusely for ducking me initially and for not understanding the full extent of the situation sooner. I forgave him, appreciating that he had stood up for me when it mattered most. We had a serious discussion about Madison and decided that, for now, it was best to distance ourselves from her. Edward, though wealthy, remained humble and found his mother's behavior unacceptable. I agreed wholeheartedly, feeling both validated and relieved by his unwavering support. Together, we resolved to remove the negativity she brought into our lives. A few days later, the gravity of her actions began to dawn on Madison. Realizing she might have irreparably harmed her relationship with Edward, she panicked. However, the decision had been made. For us, it marked a new beginning, free from the strain and tension her presence had caused. With Edward ceasing financial support, Madison's lifestyle changed drastically. Accustomed to a high-end existence funded largely by Edward's generosity, she suddenly struggled to maintain her standard of living. Despite having a job, her earnings were insufficient to cover the opulent expenses she was used to. She eventually had to terminate her lease on her condo and move into a modest one-bedroom apartment, where budgeting for basic necessities became her new reality. Madison frequently emailed us about her financial difficulties, downplaying her past behavior and accusing us of overreacting. It was clear she wasn't ready to fully acknowledge her role in the estrangement. Meanwhile, Edward redirected his financial support toward my father's business, investing in the expansion of his hotel and restaurant ventures. We had aspirations to grow the business into larger cities, though those plans are still in the early stages. Amid these changes, life brought us unexpected joy. I discovered I was pregnant. Edward and I are thrilled and have been busy preparing for our new arrival. With a baby on the way, I'm relieved that our child will be shielded from the negativity Madison once brought into our lives. Should Madison ever wish to be part of our child's life, I am determined to ensure she does not impart any harmful influences. For now, we are focused on welcoming our child into a loving and stable environment, free from shallow or disruptive behavior. We appreciate any well wishes as we embark on this exciting journey of parenthood, determined to provide the best for our child.
Hello, I am a single woman in my 60s. Since childhood, I held on to the belief in a reciprocal philosophy, thinking that my hard work and dedication would be met with equal effort in return. This mindset extended to my relationships, where I believed treating others kindly would result in receiving kindness in return. Even after marriage, I continued to hold this belief, assuming that by being considerate to my husband, he would reciprocate. In today's world, women aren't expected to sacrifice as much. But during my era, societal expectations were different. I willingly made sacrifices for my husband and children, confident that my efforts would contribute to future happiness. However, my marriage and family life didn't unfold as expected. Despite my early mornings and diligent work for the family, complaints and mistakes overshadowed appreciation. At that time, no one mandated that I live this way. I was an ordinary person who married a coworker 4 years my senior due to societal expectations. Despite the societal norms for married women to quit their jobs, I became a full-time housewife after giving birth to my daughter. I had no regrets. I believed it was a natural course of action for family life. Though my life wasn't glamorous like TV dramas, it felt easy and stable. Around my daughter's 9th grade, tragedy struck when my mother passed away suddenly from a heart attack. While mourning her loss, I discovered my husband's affair. In the midst of my grief, he found joy elsewhere, becoming uncaring and eventually demanding a divorce. Despite my determination to avoid divorce, my husband's behavior became unbearable. Divorce wasn't as socially acceptable back then, and despite an irresponsible and unkind husband, I resisted the idea. Looking back, I realized my naivety, but more was at stake. My daughter, witnessing the turmoil, felt the impact. Despite my refusal to divorce, I found myself in a deeply miserable situation. During a heated argument about our impending divorce, my father unexpectedly visited. Witnessing the distress in our relationship, he offered me a place to live and encouraged me to leave my husband, taking my daughter with me. Having recently lost his wife and observed his daughter in an unhappy marriage, my father convinced me that persisting in such a difficult situation was futile. Feeling the weight of his concern, I yielded to my husband's request for a divorce. In return, my husband provided me with $3,000 in cash. With my father's support, I secured a 2-bedroom townhouse to live in with my daughter, starting anew. I anticipated the need to work hard to support my daughter, fearing judgment from society for being a divorced woman with a daughter. This concern was particularly heightened as my daughter entered adolescence. During this challenging period, my daughter expressed typical desires of her age, lamenting the perceived consequences of her parents' divorce. Despite the emotional hurt, I knew I couldn't dwell on them forever, determined to provide for my daughter. I embarked on the journey of seeking stable employment. However, being an older divorced woman with a child made securing a job challenging. Undeterred, I took on multiple part-time and nighttime jobs, even engaging in freelance work at home whenever possible. As time passed, my daughter advanced to her senior year of high school. Despite financial constraints, she excelled academically, finding her own way to thrive. Motivated by my desire to ensure her future, I secured a job at a 24-hour restaurant, working 12-hour shifts. 2/3 of my earnings were diligently saved for her college tuition. Despite facing judgment and gossip, especially from some married men who viewed me as an easy target, I persevered for the sake of my daughter. The sacrifices were numerous, but my goal was to provide her with opportunities I never had. As she approached adulthood, I hoped she would understand the struggles I faced in raising her and making a living. Reflecting on these challenges, I realized that having a daughter made my situation both more arduous and meaningful. She became my anchor, giving me the strength to endure and persevere through life's challenges. I held on to the belief that, in the future, my grown daughter and I would share stories about the hardships we faced and take pride in our resilience. A year later, my daughter's outstanding performance in the SAT exams earned her admission to Harvard University, a moment of immense joy that made all the previous struggles worthwhile. As she embarked on her college journey, I felt a mix of pride and emptiness. Though I had managed to provide for her education and housing, the absence of her daily presence at home left a void. We maintained close contact through phone calls, and during the initial months of her independence, our bond deepened. Her newfound affection and connection were a source of comfort, and I cherished our evolving relationship. Despite the challenges, my daughter graduated from college without financial setbacks, fulfilling a dream we had worked hard to achieve. Anticipating that we could live together again, I was surprised when she secured a job at a defense corporation and chose to live independently. To support her, I took a bank loan and contributed to the down payment for a condo near her workplace. While I aged and embraced a more unassuming appearance, my daughter thrived as a fashionable career woman. Witnessing her success brought immense happiness, reinforcing the idea that my sacrifices had borne fruit. I found contentment in her achievements, understanding the sentiment of people who say they forget hunger in moments of joy. Despite the financial support throughout her college years, the prospect of her wedding became a new financial responsibility. People questioned why I continued to struggle when my daughter was capable of self-sufficiency. However, I was determined to contribute to her wedding expenses to prevent any condescension from her future in-laws. The belief that sacrificing for her happiness would bring joy to both of us fueled my resilience. On the other hand, as my daughter dated, I noticed a growing distance between us. Initially hurt, I recognized that her adult life and relationships rightfully took precedence. I patiently waited for her to mature and open up to me, understanding that priorities shift during this phase of life. However, on her 27th birthday, I looked forward to celebrating with her. Yet she made it clear that she had plans with someone named Michael and dismissed any preparations. While she may have intended to convey that I needn't go to any trouble, I couldn't help but feel hurt. It was her birthday, a day that held immense significance for me as the day she was born, and her apparent indifference stung deeply. It was challenging to comprehend why my daughter considered spending money on her birthday a waste, given the tight budget. Despite her intelligence, her understanding of her own mother seemed distant. Despite my hurt feelings, I understood she was my only daughter, and I wanted to see her briefly on her birthday, even if it meant taking a day off work. On that day, I meticulously paid attention to my appearance before going to her workplace. However, What awaited me was an unexpected and emotionally charged encounter in the company lobby. I saw my ex-husband with his mistress, individuals I never wished to see again. Doubting how he found out and came there, I frantically called my daughter, only to be abruptly hung up on as she claimed to be busy with a meeting. Feeling dumbfounded, I turned around, only to hear my daughter happily calling her dad and embracing him with a bright smile. Her boyfriend seemed familiar with my ex-husband and his wife, adding to my fury. In that moment, I felt betrayed, as if the whole world conspired against me. Drained of meaning, I hastily left the scene. Reflecting on that day, I felt the desire to confront my daughter and ex-husband, but an overwhelming urge to escape prevailed. Despite my inner turmoil, I couldn't muster the courage to call my daughter. Unexpectedly, my daughter showed up at home one day, announcing her decision to get married and handing me an invitation card. The surprise turned into shock when I saw the names on the card. Although she was my daughter, I felt an intense urge to throw her out of the house. I questioned how she, my own daughter, could present such an invitation. I confronted her, expressing my hurt at being treated like a guest at her wedding, emphasizing my role as her mother. In response, my daughter apologized, stating she felt she had no choice. Despite her desire to marry Michael, she faced scrutiny from his parents over every detail about her. The situation left me grappling with complex emotions, torn between hurt and the desire to understand my daughter's perspective on her life-changing decision. The revelation from my daughter about her concerns regarding my divorced past and the challenges of being a single mother struck me deeply. She explained that revealing this truth could jeopardize her chances of marrying her boyfriend, as her potential in-laws might disapprove. In the face of this revelation, I couldn't help but express my frustration, reminding her of the sacrifices and struggles I endured to raise her, work at a restaurant, and fund her education. My daughter's response. However, her response stunned me. She dismissed the past, stating that her father and his new partner, the woman who played a role in breaking our family, had already met with her future in-laws. In her perspective, the present was what mattered most, and she prioritized her desire for a comfortable life over the difficulties we faced before. Feeling hurt and regretful, I spoke harshly to her for the first time in my life, expressing my disappointment in her attitude. In turn, she suggested that if I wanted to drop her from my life, I should repay her for the money I spent raising her. This exchange led to a heated argument, and she left my house in anger, proclaiming that we were now strangers. Devastated by the turn of events, I questioned the purpose of saving money for her wedding and felt a deep sadness when I looked at the wedding invitation she had left behind, with a different name printed where mine should have been. 3 years later, I received news that my father, who had been living independently to avoid burdening me, had fallen ill. Sadly, I learned about his condition only after his passing. The realization of being a poor daughter to him hit me hard. A few months later, I inherited a small condo where he had lived, a bittersweet reminder of the family ties and struggles that shaped my life. Upon realizing that I had money saved from my daughter's wedding in the savings account, I decided it was time to live for myself, even if it seemed somewhat late in life. I pondered the idea that in today's world, trusting only one child and sacrificing for them might not be the most fulfilling path. It was a realization that I should prioritize my own desires and needs before it became too late for me to enjoy life. As I contemplated this shift in perspective, a real estate broker and close friend from the restaurant where I worked suggested that I consider what I truly wanted to do. Despite societal expectations for women to sacrifice, I felt the desire to break free from that mold and live for myself. I harbored a feeling of regret and sorrow for the sacrifices I made over the years, and I yearned to pursue personal fulfillment. Inspired by my friend, I embarked on studying the real estate business and even delved into auction biddings. With some savings and money from selling my late father's condo, I seized the opportunity to take on a new challenge. In the surprising turn of events, I became a building owner overnight, residing in a prime location. 6 months later, after returning from a mountain climbing adventure, I found myself on the top floor of my building, now transformed into my home. Unexpectedly, someone knocked on my door, and I debated whether to pretend not to be home due to fatigue. However, curiosity prevailed, and I opened the door to find my pregnant daughter with a chubby-cheeked toddler in her arms. Tearful and distressed, she explained that she had been deceived by her husband, who turned violent and had affairs. Faced with impending childbirth and raising her young daughter, she sought refuge with me, despite my initial shock and the lingering hurt from our previous arguments. I couldn't turn my back on my daughter in need. She revealed that she had heard about my newfound success in real estate and wanted assistance. Despite the painful history between us, she pleaded for help, pointing out that she had a share in the money I had acquired from my wedding savings and inheritance. Caught between anger and compassion, I couldn't deny my daughter's plea for help. Despite her past actions, I recognized the vulnerability in her situation and knew that as a mother, I couldn't turn her away. The complexities of our relationship resurfaced, prompting me to grapple with the tangled emotions of love, disappointment, and the inevitability of family ties. I confronted her, saying, "I was the one who saved money for your education and your wedding, but you told me to get out of your life. Do I need to give you money now?" I only said that, but I didn't get any money back from you. It seems that in front of money, there is no use for the bond between a parent and a child. Now that you have money, you don't need a daughter, right? No matter what, I am still your daughter, so I have a right to your money too. I was once very proud of you, thinking that it was because of me that you were able to attend Harvard. But now I see that it was all in vain. I guess I was too busy making a living that I couldn't teach you to be a decent human being. I raised you as someone who is so selfish and can only think of yourself. I don't plan to give you one penny, so you can either go back to your husband or your wonderful father. You are too mean. Could you abandon your own daughter? Do you think other people would care for me at all? That wife already ran off with the money, and he has disappeared trying to look for her. If you abandon me, I'll become an orphan. Now I have a child and I'm pregnant, so how could you be so mean to me? Would you be happy if I died like that? When she screamed at me, I couldn't put up with her any longer, so I took out all the money I had in my wallet and threw it at her. Since you are acting so pathetic, I'll give you that. However, never come back to my house because I won't let you in. There's something that I learned in the meantime, just that your life is important. Now my life is important. You cannot put me in and out of your life at your whim. I coldly let my daughter and her child out of my house. Of course, I would not feel good about it since she was my daughter after all. However, I couldn't accept her because she still was as selfish as before, and I couldn't bury the past. However, I felt sorry for my little granddaughter, who was innocent and got kicked out together with her mom. After that, my daughter was too proud and never came to see me again. To be honest, I knew that she was such a daughter. So, has she repented for her past acts and begged me for forgiveness out of a quest? Pretending I was reluctant, but would have found ways to punish her wayward husband. But I was so disappointed that if she erased me from her life to marry her husband, she should have lived happily. Why did my husband and my daughter turn out that way, even though I lived a hard life? Now I see that the only person who is living a life the way I want to is only me alone. Thus, if anyone is living a life like I did on behalf of others, I want to say this one thing for sure. No matter how strong your relationship is with another person, be sure to take care of your life first. Even if everyone in this world betrays you, you will not betray yourself. In the end, happiness is not what you do for others, but what you do for yourself. I want to give that message through my story here. Even though it may seem like a life that's only felt half, I plan to try to fill that remaining half from now on for complete happiness. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope all goes well for you today, and good fortune will be with you. Please cheer for me and write your comments of wisdom in the comment section. Pressing like and subscribing is a big help to me. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
The night shift at Metropolitan General was always challenging, but this one would change everything. I was just finishing my rounds when they brought him in, an elderly man, unconscious, wearing tattered clothes and carrying no ID. Another homeless case, Dr. Richards sighed, barely glancing at the patient. Put him in the hallway until we clear a non-priority bed. But something about the man's face seemed familiar. Despite his ragged appearance, his hands showed signs of recent professional care. And the way he was clutching a worn leather notebook. I'll take him to room 712. I decided. It was technically reserved for VIP patients, but it had been empty for weeks. Are you insane, Sarah? Amy, the charge nurse whispered. If Dr. Harrison finds out you put a homeless man in a VIP suite. Dr. Victoria Harrison wasn't just any hospital administrator. She was the CEO who turned Metropolitan General from a caring community hospital into a profit-focused corporation. Under her leadership, non-priority patients were often left waiting for hours. Everyone deserves proper care, I replied, remembering my own father's last days in a hospital hallway. Help me move him. As we transferred the mystery patient, his notebook fell open. I caught a glimpse of complex medical diagrams before quickly closing it. Something wasn't adding up. I spent my entire shift monitoring him, neglecting the paperwork Dr. Harrison always insisted was more important than excessive patient attention. His vitals were stable but concerning. Every instinct told me this man needed careful observation. At 6 a.m., Dr. Harrison's clicking heels announced her early morning inspection. She stopped dead when she saw our hallway empty of waiting patients. Where are the overflow cases? She demanded. Room 712, I answered honestly. I assessed the situation and... You put someone in a VIP suite without authorization. Her perfectly painted lips curled in disgust. Who? John Doe case, approximately 70 years old, brought in at 2 a.m. with a homeless man. She cut me off. In my VIP wing, she stormed into room 712, taking in the scene with growing fury. Are you deliberately trying to destroy this hospital's reputation? He needs proper care. I stood my ground. His symptoms indicate. Your job isn't to think, she snapped. It's to follow protocols, and protocol says non-paying patients wait in the hallway. That's not healthcare, I protested. It's not what Metropolitan General used to stand for. Used to? She laughed coldly. You mean before I turned this failing hospital into a profitable enterprise? Clear this room immediately and consider yourself terminated. You can't fire her for providing care, Amy spoke up. I can fire her for misuse of hospital resources, Dr. Harrison smiled. Security, please escort Nurse Chen out of the building. And move this person to the hallway where he belongs. As security approached, the patient's heart monitor began beeping erratically. I rushed to his side, professional instincts taking over. Step away from him, Dr. Harrison ordered. You're no longer employed here. That's when the patient's eyes opened. He looked straight at me, then at Dr. Harrison, and spoke in a clear, educated voice. Actually, she works for me. We all do. Dr. Harrison froze. What? Thomas Chen, he said calmly, despite the monitor's warnings. Majority shareholder of Metropolitan General Hospital, and I believe we need to discuss how you've been running my father's legacy. The security guard stepped back. Dr. Harrison's face went from angry red to ghostly white. Because everyone in healthcare knew the Chen name. The family that had built Metropolitan General from a small clinic into a major hospital before mysteriously disappearing 15 years ago. But as Dr. Harrison stammered excuses, I noticed something alarming on the monitors. Mr. Chen's stable condition was rapidly deteriorating, and his next words confirmed my worst fears. Sarah, I'm afraid I've been poisoned. Code blue, I shouted, already moving to action as Mr. Chen's vitals plummeted. Amy, get me a toxicology kit. Dr. Harrison stood frozen, her perfect composure cracking. Stop, you're not employed here anymore. You can't. Either help or get out of my way, I snapped, starting emergency protocols. Years of ER experience took over as I worked to stabilize him. Mr. Chen grabbed my hand weakly. The notebook, he whispered. Don't let her. But Dr. Harrison had already snatched the worn leather journal from the bedside table. As she flipped through it, her face shifted from confusion to shock to something darker. Security, she said quietly, clear the room. No one comes in or out without my authorization. That man needs immediate care. I protested. I'll get care, she smiled coldly. The best care money can buy. Just not from you. She held up the notebook. Did you really think we wouldn't figure it out? Thomas, that your little undercover investigation wouldn't be noticed. The security guards looked uncertain. Dr. Harrison, he needs medical attention. What he needs, she cut them off, is to understand that some things should stay buried. Like what really happened to his father 15 years ago. Mr. Chen's monitors were screaming now. But as I moved to help him, one of the security guards grabbed my arm. Not the hospital's regular security, this man wore an earpiece I'd never seen before. The poison, Mr. Chen managed between gasps, it wasn't just me. Check the general supply. Horror dawned as I understood. I've been noticing increased complications in routine cases over the past month. Small things, patients taking longer to recover, unexpected reactions to standard medications. You've been tampering with the hospital's medical supplies, I accused Dr. Harrison. That's why you changed suppliers last month. That's why you've been restricting access to the pharmacy records. She laughed, a harsh, unfamiliar sound. Tampering? I've been correcting a mistake. This hospital was supposed to be mine. Richard Chen promised it to me before his mysterious accident, but he left everything to his idealistic son instead. So you've been slowly poisoning patients, I said in disbelief, making the hospital look incompetent under the Chen family's ownership. Forcing them to sell, she finished smugly. The board meets tomorrow to discuss the hospital's future. Once they see the mortality rates, the malpractice risks. She patted Mr. Chen's hand almost gently. Don't worry, your death will be attributed to your homeless lifestyle. Such a tragic end to the Chen legacy. But she'd forgotten something crucial about emergency rooms. We never work alone. And while she'd been focused on me, Amy had slipped out during the chaos. The room's speaker crackled to life. Code black in progress. All personnel implement Protocol 17 immediately. Dr. Harrison's face went pale. No, that's impossible. That protocol was deleted years ago, was it? Mr. Chen's voice was weak but clear. Or did you just think it was? The light suddenly shifted to ultraviolet, revealing something shocking on Dr. Harrison's hands and clothes, traces of the very poison she'd been using glowing in unmistakable blue under the specialized light. But as security moved to detain her, she pulled out a syringe. Nobody move. One step and he gets the full dose. What she didn't notice was the slight smile on Mr. Chen's face, or the fact that his deteriorating vital signs had suddenly stabilized. Interesting syringe, Dr. Harrison, Mr. Chen said, suddenly sounding much stronger. But I believe you'll find it's filled with saline. Dr. Harrison stared at the syringe in her hand, then at the monitors showing Mr. Chen's stabilizing vitals. Impossible, she whispered. The poison was neutralized about 20 minutes ago, I explained, finally understanding. When I accidentally knocked over your coffee during the code blue. The antidote was in my ID badge dispenser, standard issue for all employees under Protocol 17. A protocol you thought you'd erased, Mr. Chen added, sitting up straighter. Just like you thought you'd erase all traces of what happened to my father 15 years ago. The ultraviolet lights continued to reveal damning evidence, blowing traces of various compounds on Dr. Harrison's clothes, hands, and even her designer handbag. You don't understand, she said desperately. Your father was going to ruin everything. His healthcare for all policy was bankrupting us. When he refused to change course. You arranged his accident, Mr. Chen finished. But you made one crucial mistake. Amy returned with a team of FBI agents, led by a familiar face. Dr. Richards, the dismissive doctor from earlier. Agent Sarah Chin, my supposed colleague, introduced herself. FBI Healthcare Fraud Division. We've been building this case for months. Dr. Harrison's composure finally shattered completely. The whole thing was a setup. Not exactly, Mr. Chen explained. We knew someone was poisoning patients, but we didn't know who. My homeless admission was a calculated risk to draw out the perpetrator. But Sarah, Dr. Harrison looked at me with dawning horror. She's just a nurse. Is she? Mr. Chen smiled. Or is she the person who first noticed the pattern of complications? The one who started documenting everything in that notebook you're holding? Which, by the way, is transmitting everything you've said to the FBI? The notebook in her hand suddenly beeped, its hidden camera capturing her expression as she realized the full scope of the trap. But as agents moved to arrest her, Dr. Harrison pressed a button on her phone. If I'm going down, I'm taking this whole hospital with me. Alarm systems began blaring throughout the building. On the security monitors, we could see emergency doors sealing themselves, trapping patients and staff inside. Dead man's switch, she laughed hysterically. In 15 minutes, every compromised medication in this hospital will be automatically administered through the electronic dispensing system. Hundreds of patients. Unless what? Agent Chen demanded. Unless the Chen family signs over the hospital, completely and permanently. Mr. Chen looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. Because what Dr. Harrison didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had one more secret of my own. Actually, I said quietly, removing my nurse's ID badge. The Chen family has already signed over the hospital. I pulled out another badge from my scrubs pocket, one that made Dr. Harrison's eyes go wide. Sarah Chen, MD, PhD, Chief Executive Officer, Metropolitan Health Systems. No, Dr. Harrison breathed. That's impossible. Not impossible, Mr. Chen smiled. Inevitable. You see, Sarah isn't just any nurse. She's my daughter, and more importantly, she's Richard Chen's granddaughter. The pieces clicked into place for everyone watching. Why I worked every position in the hospital, from janitor to nurse. Why I cared so much about every patient. I wasn't just learning the jobs, I was learning my grandfather's legacy from the ground up. The paperwork was finalized last week, I explained, accessing the hospital's main system with my true credentials. Which means your dead man's switch? It's trying to access a system you no longer control. On the monitors, we could see the emergency protocols reversing, doors unlocking, medication systems returning to normal operation. But your father, Dr. Harrison sputtered. Richard Chen died before he could. Before he could what? I asked. Change his will? Name you a successor? I pulled up documents on the nearest screen. Actually, he did something far more important that night. He recorded everything. Security footage began playing, 15 years old but crystal clear. It showed a younger Dr. Harrison in my grandfather's office, demanding control of the hospital. Healthcare is a business, she screamed in the footage, not your personal charity. Healthcare is a right, my grandfather's voice replied calmly. And this hospital will never prioritize profits over patients, not while a Chen is alive to prevent it. The footage showed what happened next. Dr. Harrison's rage, the poison she slipped into his drink, not realizing he'd already swapped the glasses. He survived, Mr. Chen explained. Barely, but he knew the hospital wasn't safe while she remained in power. So he went into hiding, protecting his legacy until the right moment. And that moment, I stepped closer to Dr. Harrison. Was finding someone who could rebuild Metropolitan General from the inside out. Someone who understood every job, every patient, every detail of what makes a hospital work. The FBI agents moved in to arrest her, but Dr. Harrison had one final card to play. She pulled out another phone, a dead man's switch for something far worse. One press, she threatened, and every media outlet gets proof of patient neglect under Chen family management. Your reputation will be destroyed. I almost laughed. You mean the carefully documented cases of neglect you orchestrated? The ones we've been tracking and correcting for months? Check your phone's signal. She pressed the button repeatedly, growing more frantic. Nothing happened. Hospital rooms have excellent signal blocking, I explained, especially when you know which frequencies to target. As they led her away in handcuffs, the morning shift arrived to find their hospital transformed. The homeless patient was now revealed as the long-lost Thomas Chen. The fired nurse was their new CEO. And most importantly, the hospital was returning to its original mission. 1 year later, Metropolitan General leads the country in patient care quality. I still work nursing shifts regularly, now with my real name badge. My father handles the business side while I focus on medicine, continuing my grandfather's legacy of putting patients first. Dr. Harrison serves her sentence in a minimum security prison, where she's required to provide basic medical care to fellow inmates. Sometimes the best karma is being forced to give the very thing you tried to deny others. The notebook that captured everything. It sits in my office, a reminder that the most important medical tool isn't technology or money. It's the willingness to care for every patient, regardless of their appearance or ability to pay. After all, you never know when the homeless person in your emergency room might turn out to be someone extraordinary, or more importantly, when an ordinary person might need extraordinary care. Where did that go? Where did it disappear to? What's going on? Well, while I was pondering the situation, my husband received a demotion at work because he seemed to be making more mistakes. He had never been particularly dedicated to his job, so the demotion didn't come as much of a surprise to him. However, his memory lapses became increasingly frequent, prompting us to visit the hospital for a checkup. Music. I initially thought it might be depression, but the diagnosis turned out to be early-onset Alzheimer's. In simple terms, he was dealing with dementia. I had heard that even young individuals could develop the condition, but I was still shocked to learn my husband had it. My name is Katie Smith. 5 years have passed since then. I'm now 50 years old, and my husband is 54. We didn't have children, so I continued working. My parents have passed away, but my husband's parents are still alive and well. They live in the countryside, not far from us. His parents are very kind, and when my husband was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, they offered to take him in and suggested I consider divorce. Music. However, my husband, who had always disliked living in the country, firmly opposed the idea. I chose not to pursue divorce solely because of his illness. We've been married for nearly 20 years, united by love, and not just by the vows of sickness and health. It didn't seem right to abandon him simply because he had fallen ill. Though my husband's memory lapses have increased, he can still lead a relatively normal life. Perhaps the medication he takes to manage the disease is working. It's not too bad because he can still function in many aspects of daily life, and he recognizes me. Although he occasionally doesn't respond to me, when he does, he behaves much like any other person. However, when I ask him specific questions, he often says he doesn't remember or isn't sure. His mistakes at work became more frequent, and he would sometimes become emotional when he struggled with paperwork. He once told me, "I'm thinking of leaving the company. Would you support me if I quit?" Unable to refuse my worried husband, I supported his decision, and he eventually left the company. He now spends most of his time at home, but he doesn't exhibit any problematic behavior while he's there. Sometimes he leaves things out or makes a mess in the kitchen. But since he isn't causing harm to others, it's within an acceptable range of behavior. My husband has been home ever since he left his job. I spoke with the doctor about arranging for someone to watch over him while I'm at work. The doctor reassured me that he still has the ability to recognize danger, so there's no immediate need for extra care. He mentioned that we would revisit the situation as the disease progresses. For now, the doctor advised me to remind my husband to lock the door when he goes out and to avoid going out alone. I was somewhat worried about whether he would be okay with these instructions, but he repeatedly insisted that he was fine being on his own and sometimes grew frustrated when I pressed the matter. "Stop nagging. I'm sick. You're just making me more confused with all this unnecessary talk. Show me some compassion." In the end, I had to give him some space because I couldn't manage his outbursts. 5 years before my husband was diagnosed at 40, I had been promoted to section manager. My salary increased, so even though my husband left his job, we didn't face any immediate financial strain. Since we don't have children, we had managed to save a good amount over the years, providing us with a safety net when needed. Our savings remain untouched, and I'm grateful to still be working. I hope life will continue to be as normal as possible. However, there's one issue that's been troubling me lately. Items around the house often go missing. The missing items include my beloved designer bags, recently purchased shoes and clothes, and other costly possessions. I had saved up to treat myself to these items as rewards. I've searched everywhere, thinking I might have misplaced them, but I can't seem to find them. When I asked my husband about it, he could only say, "I don't know." I inquired further, "Did you remember taking them anywhere?" His response remained the same, "No, I don't remember." My husband's responses are becoming increasingly repetitive. I wonder if his illness has advanced to the point where he doesn't even recall taking the missing items out of the house. When I return from work and ask about his day, his frequent reply is, "I can't remember." The doctor explained that the progression of the disease can vary, sometimes slow and other times rapid. Yet I couldn't shake the worry that it might be accelerating. If this were the case, leaving him alone while I'm at work would become a concern. The thought of him wandering off alone is unsettling. I wouldn't be able to manage his care on my own if he were to stray. My anxiety about my husband's well-being led me to install surveillance cameras in the house without informing him. What if he starts wandering and causing trouble for others? I'd be devastated if that were to occur. If such a situation arose, I'd have to confront it head-on. A week later, while my husband slept, I nervously reviewed the footage captured by the camera. What I witnessed was beyond anything I had anticipated, leaving me utterly astonished. Unbeknownst to me, my husband was bringing another woman into our home. For the past 5 years, I hadn't been able to engage in meaningful conversation with him. His responses to my questions were always vague, yet in the video he conversed with ease, free of any barriers. It was difficult to reconcile this with his dementia diagnosis. Furthermore, I was taken aback when I recognized the woman accompanying him. She was none other than the doctor who had diagnosed my husband with dementia. The very hospital where we had sought medical advice was affiliated with his former workplace. Was this some kind of twisted joke between my husband and the female doctor? Or could the dementia diagnosis be entirely fabricated? Are you sure she hasn't discovered the truth? Not in the slightest. Dementia is a handy excuse. I don't have to work, and I can easily claim I don't remember when it suits me. What a terrible man you are. Your wife is out working while you stay at home and bring your mistress here. You were the one who suggested it. When I told you I was tired of my job and wanted to leave, you said it was a good idea. I didn't think it would work so smoothly. The woman crossed her legs, laughing with my husband as they spoke. She's so full of herself. I'm not sure if she got promoted to section chief or something, but her salary keeps going up. She's definitely earning more than me and moving ahead. She probably thinks she's better than me, but thanks to her, we can enjoy moments like this. She's basically our ATM, so she needs to keep working hard. Didn't you say she's just your housekeeper now? Yep, she's both my housekeeper and ATM. I felt my mind go blank as the words on the screen echoed in my head. Oh, and Hannah, don't take too many things out of the house because my wife has noticed items missing. She suggested you take things out and just pretend they're gone. Well, I can always say I forgot due to my condition. Exactly, this illness is the perfect cover. Now I can coast through life without having to work anymore. So that's the reality of it. What have I been doing all this time, silently supporting him? For 5 years, I poured my energy into working tirelessly and managing the household, unaware of the truth. I felt foolish, like all my strength had been sapped from my body. Suddenly, uncontrollable laughter erupted from within me. I wondered if I was losing my mind. That's how overwhelmed I was, anger, sadness, frustration, and despair all mingling together. And the despair didn't stop there. When I checked my bank account, I found it drained to zero. Every penny I'd saved since our marriage had vanished. I felt utterly adrift. It felt like the world had ended. As the morning light seeped in, I found myself numb. My husband greeted the day with a carefree expression, and seeing him stirred a rage within my hollowed soul. Where's breakfast? I wanted to grab him by the collar and unleash every ounce of fury, but I managed to hold myself back. My husband still had no clue that I knew the truth. I struggled with the urge to confront him and demand an apology on the spot. But I was unsure of how to proceed. Even if I lashed out at him, I knew he would simply smile and say, "You found out, didn't you? What are your plans for today? What's going on? You've never asked me that before. I'm just curious about what you do at home all day. I wish I could work like you, but with my condition, I just end up causing trouble for others. I'm envious of your ability to work." I couldn't believe how brazen his words were. Given the evidence of his infidelity, I knew I could use it as grounds for seeking alimony and a divorce. But reflecting on the last 5 years brought me to tears. People who act so shamelessly often try to downplay their actions with excuses and implausible explanations. A few days passed as I contemplated my next steps. Just seeing my husband made me feel sick, but I held my composure. The camera remained in place. Unaware that I knew the truth, my husband continued bringing the doctor into our home while I was away. "Hey, did anyone come by today? I thought I smelled someone else." He responded, "Well, someone might have come by, but I don't really remember." Maybe it was a salesperson. So how are you feeling? You seem to be doing better lately. Is the treatment helping? I don't think so. I feel like I've been getting more forgetful. The doctor told me the disease can be slowed down, but it can't be cured. That's right. That doctor was quite attractive, wasn't she? Was she? I can't seem to recall her face. I was almost impressed by how convincingly he kept up his act for so long. I couldn't just sit idly by, so I decided to visit my in-laws with a recorded video, without telling my husband. They have always been kind and thoughtful toward me, but they are my husband's parents, so I worried they might take his side. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I'm sorry for reaching out unexpectedly, but I have something important to discuss with you. What's wrong? You look so worn out. What happened? Come on in. Are you hungry? I'll fix you something warm to eat. My mother-in-law's words almost brought me to tears. It was a relief to realize I had nothing to worry about. When my in-laws saw the video of my husband's affair with the female doctor, they immediately knelt down and apologized. Our foolish son. I'm so sorry, Katie. I truly apologize. Rather than blaming me, they cried and held my hands, causing me to cry as well. It felt as though all the tension I'd been holding onto melted away in that moment. While my anger at my husband remained, I was deeply moved to know I had their support. Something else that made me happy was a surprise offer for a promotion to a department head position. It was gratifying to know my hard work was being recognized. I felt reassured that I had a place where my efforts were valued. Hey, Katie, are you listening to me? Huh? Oh, sorry, I got lost in my thoughts for a moment. I had been contemplating how to best punish my husband and had gotten caught up in my thoughts. It's not funny if you both end up with dementia. His words sparked an idea in my mind. Would you take care of me if I did end up with dementia? Forget it. I've got enough on my plate without taking care of you too. My husband looked at me in shock at my response. Since then, I've been trying to echo more of his previous words each day to make the scenario seem more convincing. Hey, what was I doing just now? I've been making so many mistakes at work lately. I seem to be forgetting things. I forgot how to use the washing machine and how to cook rice. My husband grew increasingly anxious. You're still working, but I'm grateful you're here. One day, I came home from work to find my husband gone. He left behind completed divorce papers and a note. I don't want to burden you any further, so I've decided to divorce you. Please don't try to find me, Ken. I knew he left because he believed I might have dementia. Moreover, I knew exactly where he had gone. My husband had rented an apartment to continue his relationship with a female doctor, as revealed in the hidden video. He told her, I'm getting a divorce. I can't be bothered taking care of her if she ends up with dementia. I've moved my savings to another account so I won't need to worry about my finances for a while, he said, laughing. He also provided her with his new apartment's location. I learned where she lived from their conversation, so I headed to her neighborhood. The female doctor was married and lived in a suburban home with her family. I immediately filed the divorce papers and sent an invoice for alimony and property division to my husband's newly rented apartment. Naturally, I also sent the female doctor a bill for alimony via certified mail. It seemed my husband received it, as he called me right away. What on earth is this, alimony? Yes, it's for your infidelity. What? Oh right, I sent it to that lady doctor as well. I imagine her husband has learned about it by now, and they must be facing difficulties. Along with the invoice I sent to the female doctor, I also forwarded the hidden camera footage to my husband. Her husband had the right to know what had happened. You sneaky, how did you find out? To be honest, I was surprised too. I couldn't believe it was all a lie. I thought you were losing your mind. You know I was just imitating you. You're so easy to fool, aren't you? My husband chose to ignore his actions and began shouting at me. He accused me, you think I'm being dishonest? You have the nerve to be angry after pretending to have dementia for 5 years and living off my income. You even brought another woman into the house. Do you think that's acceptable? It seemed my husband never imagined that I knew everything. Then he stammered, but what do you mean by property division? I don't own anything. We have your savings. Oh, I already spent it all. Not a penny left. I was amazed he had come this far and was still lying. I told him I had planted a camera in her house and that I had heard every word he told the female doctor. I informed him I had the footage as evidence. I have irrefutable proof. When I informed him that his parents were aware of the situation and were furious, he erupted into another fit of yelling, demanding, "How dare you involve them in this?" He seemed oblivious to the fact that he had no right to shout at me now. Thankfully, his incessant ranting spared me the expense of hiring a private investigator. Upon hearing this, my husband fell silent for a moment, seemingly at a loss for words, before abruptly ending the call. The following month, I received another unexpected call. "What's going on?" "What do you mean?" I went to the apartment and they said it had already been canceled. "Which apartment?" "The one we used to live in, obviously." I couldn't help but think to myself that he was the one who initiated the divorce proceedings, so I hadn't anticipated his return. When I told him that I had canceled the lease immediately after he left, he became angry and demanded to know why I hadn't informed him of my actions. I explained that, as he was unemployed, he could no longer be the tenant on the apartment lease. So when he quit his job, I changed the lease to my name. This gave me control over when to terminate the lease and decide where to move next. I ended up purchasing a condo, which I now call home. "You bought it?" "Yes, using the alimony from you and your mistress, along with the savings I recovered. It's a small place, but it's my own haven." "Really?" "Yes, so you won't be coming over." He seemed surprised by my response. "You have a girlfriend, don't you?" "I already broke up with her. Her husband found out she was cheating and divorced her. She's been blamed at work for making a diagnostic error and is being sued by a patient. Both her husband and you are suing her for alimony, leaving her in significant debt." "Really? Well, I decided I want to start over with you. That way, the alimony will be canceled and I can get the money back." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Did he really think I would take him back? He was suggesting that we reconcile, implying that the alimony being pursued by her husband could be returned to me. I was almost tempted to ask him if he had lost his mind. "You've got to be kidding. Why would I pay you anything? We're divorced. I never want to see you again. There's no chance I'm taking you back." With that, I hung up the phone and blocked all incoming calls from him. Apparently, my ex-husband then went to visit his parents. Little did he know that they had sold their house and moved into a retirement community. They told me he was shocked when he arrived at their house and saw it was up for sale, prompting him to reach out to them. With a lawyer handling the collection of property division and alimony payments, my ex-husband was left with little money in his pocket. Unable to secure a new job and unable to pay his rent, he was evicted from his apartment and had nowhere to go. He must have turned to his parents for help. Anticipating this, they had moved out, knowing that if he returned, they might struggle to remove him again. They told me they would have felt sorry for me if he had tried to move back in with them. I heard he now works as a live-in employee at a factory, but he's too lazy to work much, resulting in daily scoldings and even beatings from younger employees. He has reached out to his parents several times for assistance, but they have consistently refused him. Months have passed since the divorce, and I continue to stay in touch with his parents. They remain concerned for my well-being and have become like my own parents. I plan to maintain a close relationship with them, and if they ever need assistance, I'll be there for them. I've recently been promoted to department manager and my salary has gone up. I'm committed to working hard and am thoroughly enjoying my peaceful life on my own. It's like a dream come true. We got a huge $300 million inheritance in our very own company. When the workers saw my sister-in-law, Mary, celebrating our dad's inheritance, they started whispering to each other. They were super happy, and Mary proudly said, "Shay, keep it down. This is the moment when my husband gets to take over the company and get $3 million. After hearing that, one of the workers burst out laughing. My older brother, sitting next to his confused wife, was reading a will from the lawyer. His face went pale as he read it. "Look at this," my brother said, showing her the will. She screamed. "I'm Lucy, 29 years old, and I work for my dad's business. When he was young, my dad had the smart idea to start a business from scratch. Over time, it grew into a decent-sized company with lots of workers. But right after starting the business, he got into debt. Even as a little kid, I could see how tough it was for my dad. Even when the company got bigger, I still wanted to help my mom with her clerical work in the office. My parents told me I could go to college and choose any career I wanted, but I really wanted to work for my dad's company. That's all I could think about when I finished high school. When I joined my dad's company, Bob, who had been working there for a long time, was the first person to teach me about business. He didn't treat me differently just because I was the boss's daughter. Thanks to Bob, I got to learn a lot about how the company works. My brother Tom, who's only 2 years older than me, went to college to learn about management. He was always proud to tell people that our dad ran a business and that he would take over one day. Tom's friends would ask him, "What are your plans after college, Tom? Are you going to find a job?" Tom would say, "I don't need to find a job because I'll be working for my dad's company. I'll become the president eventually, so I'm taking my time to learn about management until then." Wow, you're going to be the next president. That sounds like a really stable future. I'm kinda jealous, one of Tom's friends said. Tom, you have a younger sister too, right? Won't there be a competition over who gets to take over the company? Another friend asked. Yeah, I have a younger sister, but she's just finished high school and she's pretty down to earth, Tom replied. You always say that, but I've heard she's actually doing some important work behind the scenes at the company. If I become president, I'll make sure to keep her on board, as long as she listens to me, Tom assured. My brother was spending a lot of money and having fun, pretending it was all part of learning to be a business manager. He knew that if he acted well, he'd have lots of friends around him, and being the next president of the company made him popular with women who wanted to date him. He ended up marrying Mary, who was very flashy and attractive. They had a fancy wedding, went on a luxurious honeymoon overseas, built a big mansion, and started their life together. He said he did all this to look good as the future president of the company. Mary seemed happy with Tom. He listened to her and let her enjoy all the fancy things in life. I doubt she'd want a life like mine, where I work with my mom behind the scenes in my dad's company, I told someone. Lucy, you don't seem like the CEO's daughter. You don't act like you're the president's daughter, she said. Mary would often laugh at me when we saw each other at family events. I prefer a simpler life, I said. She looked at me like she felt sorry for me. I pity you for being the president's daughter but not knowing how to spend money. You still live with your parents and have plenty of money, so you don't need to work hard. And with your title, shouldn't men be drawn to you? My brother chimed in, yeah, she's right. Lucy's always been so humble, people wouldn't even guess her dad's the president. She treats everyone like equals. It's surprising. I still have a lot to learn in my job. Many of my colleagues are better than me, so I can't act like I'm the boss, I argued. But my brother looked shocked. That's why you're not useful. A boss needs to stand out so they're respected by their team. Let others handle the simple tasks. It seems like only Dad and I are the bosses around here. You shouldn't belittle your team, no matter how powerful you are. Before I could reply, my brother interrupted me, looking annoyed. A woman who's too logical isn't attractive to men. Then Mary joined in. If you keep talking like that, you'll never find a husband. You should try to be more appealing, don't you think, Tom? Yeah, well, when I become president, I might just fire a humble employee like you, Tom said. After that, my brother and Mary said their piece and left quickly. My mom, who had stayed quiet during all of this, comforted me after they left. She said, "You're doing great work for the company, which really helps me and your dad. Don't let what Tom says bother you." My dad nodded, looking serious. They had already told my brother to his face that they didn't like his ideas. But after that, my brother and Mary got upset and didn't come to our house for over a month. I remembered how gloomy it was during that time, so I told my parents, Tom and Mary can say whatever they want. After that, Tom and Mary kept living their lives however they wanted, going to fancy restaurants and luxury resorts. It was all to make it seem like Tom would be the president of my dad's company one day. My dad was working really hard to grow his business, but one night at home, he started complaining of chest pain. Dad, are you okay? Just try to stay calm. I'll call for an ambulance, I said. Lucy, grab this. As we waited for the ambulance, my dad motioned to a drawer and told me he had a letter for me. I hurriedly grabbed the letter from the drawer. I want you to read this if anything happens to me. Everything else is up to the lawyers, he said breathlessly before losing consciousness before the ambulance arrived. Despite being rushed to the emergency room, he died without regaining consciousness. My brother and Mary were away on a trip when my father passed away, so they couldn't be there for him. They returned from their trip 2 days later. At the end of my father's funeral, Tom said, "We're just glad we arrived on time. I never imagined my father would pass away while we were on vacation." I was shocked. My brother and Mary showed up at the funeral without any worries, not acknowledging that my mother and I had been left to handle everything. I talked to my brother about it in private, so the other employees wouldn't hear. "Couldn't you have come back home sooner?" I asked my brother in private. "What? I couldn't. Our return flight was already booked," my brother replied without offering an apology, then turned to address the employees. "Thank you all for your support. From now on, I'll be stepping into my father's shoes with dignity," he said. Mary glanced around at the employees, who had gone silent at my brother's words, and praised him, saying, "That's exactly what Tom would do. Everyone's impressed, right? It's only natural, considering my husband's dignity." With pride, my brother said to me, "Lucy, isn't the ceremony about to begin? Please lead the way." I was annoyed by my brother's tardiness and his arrogance, but I led him and the employees to the meal ceremony table. My brother continued to act arrogantly as we ate. "Lucy, isn't the quality of this food questionable? It might lower our father's reputation as president," he remarked. "Mom and I already discussed it and agreed on the menu. Plus, I don't need you telling me what to do. This is why people don't understand what it means to be president," I snapped back. He not only bossed me around but also gave orders to the other employees serving the guests. "You're useless," he declared. I hurried to intervene when I heard my brother ordering Bob, a longtime employee, around. "Tom, that's not right. Don't talk down to Bob or any of our employees. They deserve respect. Why should I act humble in front of someone who's just an employee? They should show me more respect as the president," he argued. Mary joined in, backing him up. "That's correct. Lucy, stop disrespecting Tom, the president of the company. If you keep disobeying him, he can fire you. He's in charge," she warned. Just as my brother and his wife were getting worked up, a man showed up. "Sorry to interrupt. Your father asked me to handle his inheritance," he revealed. He was the lawyer my father had hired while he was still alive. Then it hit me. My father had mentioned before he passed away that he had already hired a lawyer. It seemed he had been preparing for his death and had spoken with a lawyer a few years back. My brother and Mary's faces lit up when the lawyer mentioned inheritance. They eagerly welcomed him into their room. Tom said, "Thank you for coming. Let's get this done as soon as possible." But as he spoke with the lawyer, Tom started to cry. Wasn't my father's inheritance supposed to be $300 million? Mary, upon hearing this, couldn't contain her excitement. $300 million. That much money for our company is like a dream come true. The employees started whispering when they heard this. Mary proudly announced to the grieving employees, "Quiet down. This is the moment when the company and its $300 million inheritance passed to Tom." Upon hearing this, one of the employees burst into uncontrollable laughter. My brother had the will and was reading it next to Mary, who was puzzled by the employee's reaction. My brother's face went pale as he read, Mary, according to the will, the entire company will be inherited by the eldest daughter, Lucy," he stammered. He stared at the will for a moment, then erupted. "This can't be. It's wrong." The lawyer, sounding troubled, confirmed, "This is a legally binding will." My brother's voice grew more strained. "What? I can't believe this. How can Lucy become president instead of me?" "Maybe Dad was just getting old and forgetful," Mary chimed in. "Yeah, your father wasn't thinking straight. A will made by someone losing their mind is worthless." Hearing this, I lost it. I couldn't stand by while they insulted my late father. I couldn't let anyone, even family, disrespect my father, who was a good man till the end. "Stop. The idea of my brother Tom becoming president is even more absurd, in my opinion," I asserted. My brother was furious. "What are you trying to say? That I'm not fit to be president?" he snapped back. Without hesitation, I fired back, "You're absolutely right. How can you lead this company if you've never contributed to it? Don't be ridiculous. Mary and I even built a mansion fit for a president, and we made sure to project the image," he defended. "Building a mansion unsuited for a leader and dining extravagantly? That's not good for business. And didn't Dad cover most of the costs for that house and extravagance? How would you even know?" I countered. Just before he passed, Dad left me a letter. In it, he outlined all the money he had spent on you and said he would give you a gift during his lifetime. So your share of the estate is practically nothing, I disclosed. Mary panicked. Hold on. Is the inheritance really worth $300 million? Have we already spent that much? It's not fair that we're left with so little. The employee who had been laughing earlier quickly approached Mary and explained that $300 million is from the company's assets, not personal wealth. I'm sure all the employees here understand that. Company funds aren't meant for inheritance, I clarified to Mary. Exactly. The company's money isn't meant to be divided among family members, so I doubt my brother's share is significant, I added. That's heartbreaking, Mary sighed. Oh no, Lucy. Mary was shocked. The inheritance? $300 million? My brother suddenly stood up as if he'd had a revelation and shouted at the employees, Do you really want a plain woman like Lucy as your company president? You must see that I'm more qualified. I have the same charm as my father. None of his colleagues sided with him. Bob took the lead and spoke to my brother. Your father, the one you're succeeding, was a charismatic founder of this company, but you and he are different. What you have is arrogance, not charisma. My brother flew into a rage when Bob calmly countered him. Tom, you may hold a position in our company, but us, the employees, hardly ever see you around. I don't have time for actual work in the company. I'm too busy networking with others. There's no time for menial tasks, my brother argued. Networking? Going on trips and partying all night? Is that what you call networking? That's hardly enough. Bob continued. Meanwhile, Lucy's been putting in hard work every day, learning about the company while quietly handling her behind-the-scenes duties. I see the same dedication in her as I did in your father. Lucy is the right person for the job as far as all of us here at the company are concerned, Bob concluded. The other employees nodded in agreement. I was touched and responded, Thank you all so much. Honestly, I'm taken aback by this news, but having seen my father's passion for the company firsthand, I share the same dedication. I'm grateful for your continued support. The employees warmly applauded as I bowed deeply. Emboldened by their applause, I spoke firmly. Each one of you here is a valuable friend who has contributed to our business. Anyone who overlooks that isn't fit to be part of this company, let alone its president. Even the president can be fired by the employees. My brother grew annoyed upon hearing this. What are you talking about? I'm your brother. What are you even talking about? You were the one who said you'd fire me if you became president, brother. I reminded him. I can't keep paying a salary to an incompetent employee just because he's family. This is ridiculous. Can someone please help me out here? My brother pleaded for support from those around him, but all he got were cold stares from the employees. Seeing that nobody was backing him up, my brother and Mary left in a hurry. After that, Tom lost his job and relied on the small inheritance he received. But it didn't last long. Can you lend me some money, Lucy? He asked, kneeling before me. I was disgusted by my brother's behavior. Even after losing his job, he didn't try to find a new one and was still expecting help from the family. I firmly told my mother not to give him any money. His friends, who had once been supportive, turned their backs on him when they found out he lost his presidency to me, his sister. When Mary married my brother, she had envisioned being the wife of the company president, but none of her friends showed any sympathy for her. As their financial situation became dire, my brother and his wife decided to sell their mansion. The proceeds from the sale could have sustained their lifestyle, but without any income, their savings quickly dwindled. When they had nothing left to sell, they struggled to cover their expenses. Eventually, they realized they needed to find work. However, no one was willing to hire them because they lacked any work experience. Eventually, Tom found a part-time job at a convenience store. Now, he's in an unfamiliar role, facing criticism from younger coworkers. Mary's situation changed too. She's no longer a full-time housewife but now works as a cashier at a supermarket, alongside the very part-time housewives she once looked down upon. Her salary is low. Meanwhile, I'm using my experience from behind-the-scenes work to help the company grow. With support from Bob and other employees, the company is thriving. Ironically, my brother's situation has strengthened employee unity. I've pledged to keep working with my mother to expand the business, aiming to bring pride to my Father in heaven. The crystal glasses clinked against fine china as Sarah Thompson, my sister, hosted another one of her elite family dinners. I sat quietly at the far end of the table, watching my brother-in-law Marcus, the self-proclaimed business genius, hold court with his usual audience of admirers. At 42, he wore his CEO status like a crown, each word dripping with the kind of confidence that only came from never having faced real failure. And that's how I closed the Anderson merger, he concluded, basking in the appreciative murmurs from our gathered family. Biggest deal of the quarter. Some people just understand business at a different level. His eyes flickered to me, lips curling into what my sister probably thought was a charming smile. I took another sip of wine, already knowing what was coming. These monthly family dinners had become Marcus's favorite stage for his particular brand of subtle cruelty. Speaking of business, he turned fully towards me now. Claire, how's that little, what do you call it, consulting thing of yours? It's going well, I replied evenly, noting how my sister Sarah straightened in her chair, eager for the show to begin. At 38, I learned that the best defense against Marcus's barbs was calm dignity. Still working from home, right? He chuckled, swirling his expensive bourbon. You know, when Sarah told me her sister was in business too, I expected something more professional. How can anyone take you seriously without even a proper office? My mother shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Dad suddenly found his roasted vegetables fascinating. They'd long ago chosen their side in the family dynamic, and it wasn't mine. My client seemed satisfied, I said, spearing a piece of perfectly cooked salmon. Marcus had insisted on catering from the city's most expensive restaurant, another chance to display his wealth. Clients? Marcus barked out a laugh. Is that what we're calling the local coffee shops and boutiques now? You know, Claire, if you ever want real business advice. Actually, a deep voice cut through the dining room. Our client list is quite impressive. All heads turned to Richard Anderson. Yes, that Anderson, of the merger Marcus had just been bragging about. He'd been quietly observing from the other end of the table, where Marcus had seated him as the guest of honor. In fact, Anderson continued, setting down his fork, my daughter's company has been trying to get on her waiting list for months. Claire's firm is rather selective about who they take on. The silence that fell over the table was absolute. I could hear Sarah's sharp intake of breath, see Marcus's face transition from confidence to confusion. Your daughter's company? Marcus managed, his voice suddenly less certain. Megan Anderson, CEO of Horizon Tech. Richard smiled warmly in my direction. Claire's firm handled the Matthews Group acquisition last year. Brilliant strategy, by the way. When Megan told me who was behind it, I could hardly believe someone so young had orchestrated such a complex deal. But then, real talent doesn't need corner offices to prove itself, does it? I watched the color drain from Marcus's face as realization dawned. The Matthews acquisition had been the talk of the business world, a $400 million deal that had transformed the tech landscape, and I'd orchestrated it from my home office, the one he'd been mocking moments before. I had no idea, Marcus stammered, his earlier bravado evaporating. Obviously, I replied softly, allowing myself a small smile. More wine, anyone? Sarah's hand shook as she gripped her glass, her perfect hostess composure cracking. Our mother's mouth had fallen open slightly, and Dad was now staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. Claire, Marcus started, his tone shifting to something almost ingratiating. Why did you ever mention that I handle major corporate acquisitions, that my little consulting thing advises Fortune 500 companies? I set down my wine glass carefully. You never asked, Marcus. You were too busy telling everyone how successful you are. Richard Anderson chuckled. And speaking of success, Claire, I hope you'll consider taking Horizon Tech on as a client. Megan's been quite persistent about wanting to work with you. Of course, Marcus jumped in. Anything for family. I'm sure Claire would be happy to. I'm afraid my schedule is quite full, I interrupted smoothly. But Mr. Anderson, please tell Megan to have her team send over the proposal. I'll review it personally. Marcus's face flushed red. The Anderson merger he'd been bragging about minutes ago, his biggest deal of the quarter, was worth less than half of what I handled for Matthews. And now his direct line to Richard Anderson was watching me with obvious respect while barely acknowledging Marcus's presence. Claire, Sarah found her voice, though it trembled slightly, Why didn't you tell us? All these years. Tell you what, Sarah. That while you and Marcus were mocking my little business, I was building one of the most respected consulting firms in the industry. That the home office you love to ridicule has closed deals worth billions? I dabbed my lips with the linen napkin. Would you have believed me? Or would you have just found new ways to diminish my success? The truth hung heavy in the air. They wouldn't have believed me. They'd been too invested in their narrative of Marcus as the family's business genius and me as the struggling younger sister who couldn't quite measure up. But your clothes. Sarah gestured weakly at my simple black dress. Your car, you live in that small house. Because I don't need to prove anything to anyone, I replied. Success speaks for itself. It doesn't need designer labels or luxury cars to be real. Richard Anderson nodded approvingly. That's precisely why your reputation in the industry is so sterling, Claire. No flash, all substance. The exact opposite of. His eyes flickered to Marcus briefly. Certain other approaches. Marcus's hand tightened around his bourbon glass. His carefully cultivated image of business brilliance was crumbling, and with it his standing in the family. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. Mr. Anderson, I turned to Richard, ignoring Marcus's attempts to catch my eye. I'd love to hear more about Horizon Tech's expansion plans. Perhaps over dinner next week. I know a wonderful little place. The new French restaurant on 5th. Marcus interjected desperately. I'm a member there. I cold. Actually, I smiled. I own it. One of my small side investments. Nothing like running a major corporation, of course, but it turns a nice profit. The restaurant Marcus had been trying to get a membership to for months. The one he'd bragged about finally getting into. He'd never known that every time he'd dined there, he'd been in my establishment. Sarah's wine glass slipped from her fingers, staining the pristine tablecloth red. But for once she didn't rush to clean it up. She was too busy staring at me, really seeing me for the first time in years. The thing about success, I continued, standing up from the table, is that it doesn't need an audience to be real. While you were all focused on Marcus's latest promotion or Sarah's country club membership, I was building something lasting, something real. I reached for my simple leather handbag, not designer, but handmade by an artisan I'd helped start their business. Thank you for dinner, Sarah. Mr. Anderson, I'll have my office contact you about that dinner next week. As I walked toward the door, I heard Marcus's strained voice. Claire, wait, perhaps we should discuss. Discuss what? I turned back briefly. How you've spent years mocking my business? How you treated me like a failure because I didn't brag about my success? Or maybe how you're suddenly interested in my little consulting thing now that you know who my clients are. The silence was deafening. Sarah had sunk back in her chair, her perfect dinner party in ruins. Our parents were looking anywhere but at me. And Marcus looked like a man watching his carefully constructed world crumble. Send me the dinner bill, Sarah, I called over my shoulder. I know how Marcus hates to spend money on family charity cases. The door closed behind me with a satisfying click, leaving them to digest not just their expensive catered meal, but the realization that they'd spent years underestimating exactly the wrong person. And this was just the beginning, because what they didn't know, what Marcus was about to find out, was that his company's upcoming merger, the one he'd been counting on to secure his position as CEO, was about to face an unexpected complication. One that had everything to do with the sister-in-law he dismissed for so long. The morning after the dinner party, my phone exploded with notifications. Text messages from Sarah, voicemails from Marcus, even emails from my parents, all suddenly desperate to clear up any misunderstandings. I smiled, remembering Marcus's face when Richard Anderson had revealed who I really was. But I wasn't interested in their belated attempts at reconciliation. I had a merger to stop. You see, what Marcus didn't know, what he'd been too arrogant to investigate, was that his company's upcoming merger wasn't just another deal. It was a carefully orchestrated plan, one I'd been developing for months. Claire, my assistant's voice came through the intercom of my home office. Yes, the same one Marcus had mocked. Mr. Anderson is on line 1. I picked up the phone, settling into my ergonomic chair. My little home office might not have impressed Marcus, but its technology rivaled any corporate headquarters. Richard, good morning. Claire, his warm voice filled the line. I must say, dinner last night was enlightening. Your brother-in-law seems to be having quite the morning. He's been trying to reach me since dawn. I could imagine. Marcus's entire career hinged on this merger, the one he thought would cement his position as CEO, the one he'd been bragging about at every family gathering for months. Has he figured it out yet? I asked, pulling up the merger documents on my triple monitors. Not yet, Richard chuckled, though he might want to take a closer look at who's been quietly buying shares in his company over the past 6 months. Ah yes, the investment firm that had been accumulating a significant stake in Marcus's company, the one operating through a series of shell companies, the one that through a complex web of corporations belonged to me. Claire. Sarah's name flashed on my phone again. I declined the call. Your sister seems persistent, Richard observed. They all are, now that they know. I signed off on another document, watching as my ownership percentage ticked up another fraction. Amazing how success changes people's perspective. The next few days were a symphony of panic from Marcus's corner. He finally started digging into the merger details, probably hoping to impress me with his business acumen. Instead, he discovered something terrifying. His company was being systematically purchased by an unknown entity. You have to help me. He cornered me outside my favorite coffee shop, not coincidentally, one of my first consulting clients. Claire, whatever bad blood there is between us, this is my career we're talking about. I took a sip of my artisanal latte. Funny, I thought it was just a little coffee shop last month when you mocked me for helping them expand. I was wrong, okay. He ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up in a way Sarah would have hated. I was arrogant and stupid, but please, if this merger falls through, then what, Marcus? You'll have to work your way up like everyone else. Start something from scratch, build a business without riding on your family name. His face paled. We both knew he'd never built anything himself. His CEO position had come through connections, not competence. The same connections he used to belittle me at every opportunity. My phone buzzed again. A notification from my legal team. Another block of shares acquired. We were getting close. The board meeting is next week, Marcus said desperately. They're expecting me to present the merger details. But this unknown buyer, if they gain controlling interest, then you'd be answerable to them. I finished for him. Imagine that. The great Marcus Thompson, having to justify his business decisions to someone else. The realization dawned in his eyes slowly. Claire, the buyer, it's not. My phone buzzed again. A text from Richard Anderson. Megan's team just sent over the Horizon Tech proposal. Impressive plans. Shame about Marcus's company. They would have made a good partner if their leadership was different. I showed Marcus the text, watched as the last pieces clicked into place. You're going to destroy everything I've built, he whispered. No, Marcus. I'm going to show you what real business looks like. I stood up, smoothing my simple but immaculately tailored dress. The board meeting is at 2 p.m. next Thursday, correct? Don't worry about preparing anything. I'll be handling the presentation. The week that followed was chaos. Sarah showed up at my house twice, begging me to reconsider. He's family, she pleaded, as if she hadn't spent years treating me like an embarrassment. My parents tried next. Think about what this will do to the family name. Dad argued. The same family name that hadn't stopped them from laughing at Marcus's jokes about my cute little business. But the real satisfaction came at the board meeting. I walked into the room Marcus had dominated for so long, taking my seat at the head of the table. The other board members, old men who'd never questioned Marcus's leadership, stared in confusion. Gentlemen, I began, as Marcus slumped in his chair. I represent Quantum Ventures, the investment firm that now holds a controlling interest in this company. We've reviewed the proposed merger extensively, and we have some concerns about the current leadership strategy. For the next hour, I methodically laid out every mistake Marcus had made, every rushed decision, every missed opportunity, every instance where he chosen flash over substance. The board members' expressions shifted from confusion to concern to outright alarm. Therefore, I concluded, our first act as majority shareholder will be to recommend new leadership. Someone who understands that real business success isn't about corner offices or country club memberships. It's about solid strategy, careful planning, and actual results. Marcus stood up, his face red. You can't do this. I built this company. Did you? I pulled out a folder. Because our analysis shows that company value has actually decreased under your leadership. The only thing keeping your position secure was this merger, a merger that as of this morning is no longer happening. The board erupted in chaos. Marcus tried to speak, but his voice was drowned out by angry shareholders demanding explanations. I sat quietly, watching years of his carefully constructed facade crumble. "Oh, and Marcus," I added as he headed for the door, his career in shambles. "You might want to start looking for a new country club membership. The one you have is about to be discontinued." The aftermath was everything I'd planned for. Marcus was forced to resign, his reputation in tatters. Sarah's social circle, the one she used to mock my simple lifestyle, suddenly discovered that the sister they dismissed was now controlling one of the city's largest companies. My parents called a family meeting, probably hoping to salvage something from the wreckage. I attended out of curiosity. "You've made your point," Mom said, her voice trembling. "Surely we can fix this as a family." I looked around the table. Marcus, without his designer suit and corporate swagger. Sarah, her perfect image tarnished by association. My parents finally forced to acknowledge that their golden couple wasn't so golden after all. "Fix what?" I asked calmly. "I simply did business. Isn't that what Marcus always wanted? For me to understand real business." "But it's destroyed him," Sarah protested. "His career, his reputation." "No," I corrected her. "His arrogance destroyed him. His need to diminish others to feel important. I just showed everyone what was already there." I stood up, gathering my things. "The company will do better under new leadership. The shareholders will be happier, and Marcus, well, I hear there's good money in running a home-based business. If you can handle working without a proper office, that is." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. 5 years later, the company had doubled in value under new leadership. I'd merged it with Horizon Tech, creating one of the largest tech consultancies in the country. Marcus had tried starting his own firm, but without his corporate title and family connections, he discovered that business success required more than a corner office and an expensive suit. Sarah still hosted family dinners, though they were considerably less grand now. Sometimes, when I attended, I'd catch Marcus staring at my simple clothes and modest lifestyle with new understanding. He finally learned what I'd known all along: real success doesn't need to announce itself. The small home office where I'd built my empire remained unchanged, but now, on its wall, hung a framed photo from that last board meeting. Marcus's face, as he realized that the sister-in-law he dismissed had orchestrated his downfall, was a masterpiece of karmic justice. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't just success. It's success they never saw coming. As for me, I still prefer working from home, still drive my reliable car, still live in my comfortable but modest house. But now, when Marcus passes me in his much-reduced circumstances, he understands a fundamental truth. True power isn't in what you show, it's in what you know. And I'd known, all along, exactly what I was building.
Helen reclined in the hallway, her eyes aglow as they fixated on the concert tickets clutched tightly in her grasp. Just as Christina emerged from the office, Helen burst out, "Christina, guess what? We're finally going to see them perform live." Christina paused at the entrance, her face shaded with concern. "Helen, I have some bad news. I can't go," Christina confessed, dodging Helen's questioning gaze. "I have something important to do." A mischievous suspicion flickered in Helen. "Oh, is it a mysterious date you haven't mentioned?" Christina chuckled softly. "No, it's not a date," she said, growing more serious. Helen persisted. "So, what's the reason?" "We've been looking forward to this." Christina shifted uncomfortably. "Please, let's just leave it at that." However, Helen's curiosity was insatiable. When Christina stepped away to get some water, Helen noticed a medical prescription on the coffee table. Unable to resist, she glanced over the paper. "Mrs. Emily Foster," she whispered. Emily was Christina's ex-husband's mother. Upon Christina's return, Helen questioned her. Why are you still helping your ex-husband's mother, Christina? You've been divorced for a long time. Why keep her in your life? Christina remained silent for a moment. With a gentle smile, she replied, Emily's always been good to me. Right now, she needs someone, and that someone is me. Helen sighed. I just think you deserve better. You're so caring, and you're still alone. You deserve happiness. Christina softly replied, Caring for Emily brings me a different kind of happiness, Helen. Helen and Christina's friendship seemed genuine on the surface, but it concealed a shadow of true companionship. Hidden beneath their interactions was a bond built on manipulation and selfish intentions. Christina, ever trusting, often overlooked Helen's actions, hoping for the best. However, deep inside, she sensed the uneven nature of their relationship. Whenever they ventured out together, Helen ensured she stood out, from her carefully selected outfits to her attention-grabbing comments and preferred places. It all seemed designed to outshine Christina and keep her in the background. The concert ticket incident was a prime example. Helen bragged about securing tickets to the hottest concert in town without considering Christina's musical preferences. Moreover, during social outings, Helen would make unsolicited comments about Christina's single status, introducing her to any single man present with a voice dripping with pity. As if Christina was a project needing intervention, Christina could see through it. Helen's attempts to play matchmaker were not out of concern for her, but rather to spotlight herself and lure more attention. Christina often felt like a mere accessory in Helen's social game. Christina, a gentle soul, found it hard to decline any invitation, even if it wasn't to her liking. She usually accompanied her friends on their escapades, not wanting to upset anyone. However, today was different. There was another commitment she couldn't ignore. As they approached the bridge, the point where their paths would diverge, Christina could sense Helen's concern. Gathering her thoughts, Christina paused and said, Helen, I truly appreciate your concern for me. I believe that someday I'll find the right person. Please go on and enjoy yourself. I need to head in a different direction today. Christina inhaled deeply, the crisp cold air filling her lungs. Her thoughts quickly turned to Emily, her mother-in-law. On a normal day, Emily would have started the furnace by now. If she was having one of her painful episodes of migraines and high blood pressure, she'd be confined to her bed. This meant the house would be even colder, especially with the sharp winter chill outside. With a growing sense of urgency, Christina quickened her pace towards the bus stop. Their home was humble, a small house they acquired after her ex-husband lost their previous apartment due to his careless decisions. Glancing at her watch, she calculated that she had about 20 minutes before the bus would arrive. With the week's earnings clasped in her hand, she decided to drop by the pharmacy for some much-needed medication. Christina, dear, how are things with you and Emily? Margaret, the kind-hearted pharmacist who had been Emily's neighbor for years, greeted her warmly. Hi, Margaret. Everything's much the same, no big changes, Christina replied with a small smile. Dear Christina, Emily is truly fortunate to have you. Despite all that's happened, you've stayed by her side, Margaret remarked with a hint of admiration in her eyes. Christina responded softly, Emily is like family to me. Margaret shook her hand with a mixture of disbelief and pity. I'll never understand how a woman as good-hearted as Emily could have raised such a son. Collecting the medications and expressing her gratitude, Christina left the pharmacy, her heart heavy with the weight of her thoughts. She had always been a firm believer in serendipity. The day she bumped into Stephen at a local coffee shop, their eyes locked, and it felt as though the universe had conspired for that very moment. The connection was palpable. It wasn't long before they began dating, and as the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Christina found herself falling deeply in love with him. 6 whirlwind months later, as they watched the sunset from their favorite spot at the beach, Stephen, with a nervous smile and eyes filled with hope, proposed marriage. Christina, her heart racing, agreed instantly. However, she couldn't help but point out that she hadn't even met his parents yet. Understanding her concerns, Stephen took her to his mother's house the following weekend. Emily, Stephen's mother, greeted them with a warm smile and open arms. It was a surprise to Christina how quickly she bonded with her. They would chat for hours, share stories, and by the end of the day, it felt as though they had known each other for years. Emily held a special fondness for Christina, evident in the approving gaze she cast upon her, her eyes sparkling with warmth. A few weeks later, Christina received an unexpected call from Emily. The tone in Emily's voice was both eager and nervous as she invited Christina to visit her. Sensing something amiss when she arrived, Christina sat down over a pot of tea. Emily took a deep breath and shared a shocking revelation. Stephen had been married twice before. Christina listened intently, her mind swirling with a whirlwind of emotions. What stood out, however, was the concern in Emily's voice. "He's my son, and I love him," Emily began, "but I don't want to see your heart get broken." Christina was surprised and puzzled. It wasn't every day that a mother revealed such a personal detail about her son. Still, she thanked Emily for her candor, although taken aback. Their conversation concluded with an embrace, but as Christina stepped out, her mind was clouded with mixed emotions. In the subsequent days, introspection filled Christina's thoughts. She decided against confronting Stephen, holding on to the belief that everyone deserved redemption and past actions should remain in the past. After all, Stephen's daily gestures painted a picture of a man who was devoted, considerate, and genuinely loved her. Time flew, and soon they were exchanging vows with loved ones around them, including a teary-eyed Emily, as they embarked on their marital journey. Christina occasionally reflected on her heart-to-heart with Emily. It served as a reminder of the value of trust, open dialogue, and the realization that everyone carries a past. Christina often thought back to that pivotal moment. Their quaint home stood as a reminder of what once was. Stephen, with his lofty ambitions, had convinced her to sell their apartment and invest the money in a seemingly promising business idea. Worse yet, he had persuaded his unsuspecting mother, Emily, to do the same. As the days unfolded, Stephen came clean about the grim reality. Not only had he lost every penny from their apartment sales, but he had also dug them deep into debt. Both Emily and Christina felt the weight of the betrayal, overwhelmed not just with shattered trust, but also relentless and intimidating phone calls from debtors. In her heart, Christina wanted to believe they were just facing the growing pains any young family might experience. She clung to the hope that they'd find a way out, and things would eventually get better. Yet, a more ominous cloud loomed, adding another layer of worry to an already strained household. Within the first year of their marriage, the pressure of not conceiving started to create cracks in their bond. Christina and Stephen had envisioned a life where they'd raise children together. Christina tried to stay positive and understanding, but Stephen's patience wore thin. His reluctance to consult a doctor was driven by a mix of fear and old-fashioned notions equating manhood with the ability to father children. One chilly evening, following yet another quiet meal, Stephen's bottled-up emotions erupted. "Perhaps you're the reason we can't start a family," he spat out. Christina was stunned and hurt by the baseless allegation, especially since they hadn't even taken a step towards seeking medical advice. The once harmonious atmosphere of their home was now punctuated by regular disputes. The warmth and intimacy that once characterized their relationship had evaporated, replaced by a cold detachment. The final straw came when Stephen, in a desperate move, revealed he was seeing another woman, hoping she would provide him with the family he yearned for. Christina's world fell apart. The love and trust she had placed in Stephen felt like a distant memory. Raised with traditional values, she had always believed in the enduring bond of marriage and the promise of forever. Stephen wasn't just her husband. He was her first and only love. Emily was beside herself with anger when she learned the truth. "How can you walk away from someone so genuine?" she demanded of Stephen. Over the years, Emily had come to see Christina as the daughter she never had. Her son's actions felt like a betrayal not just to Christina, but to her as well. Yet Stephen, blinded by his desires, just turned his back and left. He eventually married his new flame, and as days flowed into weeks and weeks into months, his new wife never made an effort to visit or connect with Emily. This sense of being abandoned by her son and ignored by his new wife left Emily grappling with immense loneliness and sorrow. Christina could see the pain and nostalgia in Emily's eyes. After a pause, Emily gestured for Christina to sit beside her and began to share a tale from her past. Christina, when I was about your age, I was engaged to a kind man named Howard. I thought of him as the love of my life. I also had a close friend named Lucy, or so I believed. As the wedding preparations were in full swing, I learned that Howard had fallen for Lucy. To make matters worse, Lucy became pregnant with his child. The betrayal was overwhelming. The man I loved and my supposed best friend had turned my world upside down. Heartbroken, I watched as they moved away to start a new life together. However, a couple of years later, an unexpected call from Lucy left me in a state of distress. Lucy, who was Howard's ex-wife, confessed that Howard had left her. Struggling to find love again as a single mother, Lucy often turned to drink to drown her loneliness and regrets. While I pitied her situation, it was the thought of their young son that truly weighed on my heart. Lucy's health deteriorated rapidly, and realizing she had limited time, she asked me to care for her son Stephen. The bond I developed with him was instant, even though he served as a constant reminder of my past heartache. I couldn't abandon him, especially after Lucy's passing. Her dying wish was for me to always be there for Stephen, and I willingly accepted, having grown genuinely fond of the boy. Christina listened, tears welling in her eyes, realizing the depth of Emily's compassion and the intricate ties that bound their shared history. "Christina, why are you so kind?" Emily asked, taken aback. "Oh, Emily," Christina whispered, understanding the parallels in their stories. Both had experienced heartbreaking betrayals from those they believed loved them the most. It was as if history had repeated itself, and they were bound together by shared pain. Christina was heartbroken, seeing how Stephen's neglect affected Emily, making her fall ill frequently. Eventually, Emily had a stroke. Many friends suggested that Christina move Emily to a specialized care center, arguing that Emily's condition might be beyond her capabilities. And after all, Emily wasn't truly her family. However, Emily and Christina saw each other differently. Christina saw them as family, and she was determined to care for Emily. Christina held onto the belief that with enough love and care, Emily would regain her strength and walk again, despite the doctor's doubts. Emily's determination never wavered. Christina gently inquired, "Did you never think of searching for Howard?" Emily took a moment, then sighed. "I loved Howard deeply, but I never searched for him. I thought, why should I? He probably had a family of his own by then." As Christina stepped off the bus and started her walk home, the sight of smoke billowing from her chimney brought a momentary sense of relief. It meant Emily had managed to light the stove. However, that relief was short-lived. An ambulance stood outside their house, frosted over, indicating it had been there for some time. Panic rolled up inside Christina as she quickened her steps, her mind filled with anxious thoughts. Rushing inside with her heart in her throat, she learned that Emily had suffered another stroke. When Emily finally regained consciousness, she felt a dull ache on her left side. Trying to speak, her words didn't come out clearly. Christina, with deep blue eyes full of warmth, reassured her. "Don't worry, Emily. You had another stroke, but you were strong enough to call for help. I'm here with you." Despite advice from her colleagues and friends, Christina left her job. Many couldn't understand why she would choose to care for the mother of a man who had once hurt her deeply. But for Christina, it wasn't just about that. She often thought about how she would feel if she were in Emily's position, facing loneliness and health challenges. She knew that if their roles were reversed, she would hope for someone to stand by her side, just as she was doing for Emily now. Christina's empathy and understanding went beyond past grievances. She wanted to be there for Emily, no matter what others thought. Over time, Emily began to regain her strength, and Christina became her rock during those challenging weeks. She cheered Emily on during her speech therapy sessions, held her hand as she took her first shaky steps, and laughed joyfully as they twirled around the living room in a makeshift dance. Upon returning to her job, Christina discovered a new management team in place, with Eddie as the new owner of the company. Eddie admired Christina's dedication to an elderly lady, not realizing the depth of their connection. Christina's commitment inspired him, and he found her intriguing. Helen, in contrast, was the buzzing bee of the office, known for her sociable tendencies and vibrant nature. One busy day, a critical project landed on their desk, and Eddie, as a team leader, delegated tasks. He handed the most demanding parts to Christina, trusting her proven track record. While Helen received a smaller yet important portion, Christina steadily worked through her tasks, occasionally checked in by Eddie, always met with a nod of assurance. In contrast, Helen found herself struggling, and her frequent coffee breaks and chats began to hamper her pace. As the deadline loomed closer, the office atmosphere grew tense. Eddie found a distraught Helen in the kitchen, and she admitted, "I've fallen behind." Eddie, concerned, approached her, asking, "Everything all right, Helen?" "I believe I could handle it," Eddie assured her, attempting to comfort Helen. "Don't worry, we'll work something out." At that moment, Christina entered the kitchen for a quick coffee refill. Observing Helen's distress, she offered, "I can chip in after I'm done with my part." This surprised both Helen and Eddie. When Christina handed in her portion of the project, Eddie was left amazed. Not only had she meticulously completed her assigned tasks, but she had also gone the extra mile, adding thoughtful recommendations that no one had even considered. On a particularly stressful day, Christina found a surprise at her desk, a vibrant bouquet of flowers. She paused, half expecting someone to realize they had mistakenly placed the flowers on her desk. Although the colorful blooms brightened her space, Christina couldn't help but wonder who had thought of her in such a kind way. Helen, always in the loop with office gossip, found herself taken aback by the unexpected turn of events. While she usually enjoyed being the go-to for office news, it was strange to see someone as reserved as Christina become the talk of the town. Christina, in the midst of solving the bouquet puzzle, discovered a dainty card nestled amidst the petals. It carried a sweet message in neat handwriting. "For the light you bring, even when you're not aware." However, there was no name or hint of the sender. Seen from the procurement department couldn't help but drop by, grinning cheekily. "Looks like someone's smitten with you," he remarked, giving her a playful wink. Flustered, Christina replied, "I really can't figure out who sent them." Throughout the morning, Christina's desk became a hot topic. Speculations ran wild, jokes were cracked, and everyone seemed to have a theory about the mystery sender. Helen, trying to reclaim her role as the office storyteller, teased, "I bet it's from that handsome new guy in finance," gesturing towards a young man in a wheelchair. Soon, others joined in with their own humorous takes on Christina's secret admirer. By noon, the attention became too much for Christina. Though she loved the flowers, the constant buzz around them turned her quiet day topsy-turvy. Needing a breather, she decided to slip away for a quiet lunch outside. A few days later, Christina was engrossed in her work when a courier suddenly appeared at her desk, holding an extravagant basket of flowers. Christina, surprised, nodded as the courier handed her a slip to sign. Helen couldn't resist approaching to inspect the bouquet, a glint of envy in her eyes. Another surprise awaited Christina. Helen, always quick with remarks, asked, "What's the story this time?" Despite being younger and, in her own opinion, more attractive, Helen couldn't fathom why Christina was receiving such attention. Christina, slightly embarrassed, responded, "I honestly don't know. It could be a mix-up." Helen, not one to back down, insinuated, "I've never heard about any romantic interests in your life. Did you order these for yourself, maybe to pretend someone's interested?" Choosing not to engage with Helen's comments, Christina returned to her work, leaving the flowers as an unsolved mystery. Every day, like clockwork, A fresh bouquet appeared at Christina's desk. The office buzzed with whispers and chuckles, and Helen's attempts to tease Christina continued. Despite the office gossip, Christina remained silent about the mystery sender. The relentless flower deliveries were starting to affect her concentration at work, not because of the flowers themselves, but due to the incessant chatter around them. Christina needed to discover who was behind this and why, as the mystery had become an unwelcome distraction. Christina was about to head out for lunch when a man held the main door open for her. Surprised, she stopped, realizing he was wearing a chauffeur's cap and uniform. Before she could say anything, he escorted her to a sleek sit-in parked in front of the office building and opened the passenger door for her. Feeling like she was in a daze, Christina wondered if this was even real. She pinched herself to make sure she wasn't dreaming. Finally, she spoke up, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. "Excuse me, sir, but what's going on? What does all this mean? Who's behind all this?" Her voice was tinged with bewilderment. The driver looked puzzled at first, but then broke into a warm smile. "You'll find out soon enough, madame. Please have a seat in the car." The whole situation felt like something out of a movie, and Christina was both anxious and excited to see what would happen next. The car smoothly made its way to one of the city's most elegant restaurants. The grand entrance was lit with soft lights, and as Christina stepped inside, the gentle hum of conversation greeted her. A smiling waiter instantly recognized her and motioned her to follow him as they weaved through tables. Christina spotted someone seated at a secluded spot in the back. His back was turned to her, making it impossible to recognize him immediately. With every step, her heartbeat quickened. Who could it be? Why were they meeting in such a secretive manner? Finally, she stood in front of the table, and before she could ask anything, the man turned around and greeted her. "Hello, Christina. Please join me." To her astonishment, it was Eddie, the new owner of the company. The soft glow of the table's candlelight highlighted his features, and he wore a gentle smile. Christina was filled with a mix of surprise, curiosity, and a dash of nervousness. When Eddie first learned of Christina's heartwarming actions towards her former mother-in-law, he found it hard to believe such acts of kindness were rare. Genuinely astonished, he decided to verify the story for himself by visiting Emily while Christina was away at work. Introducing himself as a colleague from her office, checking in to see if Christina's extended leave was for a genuine reason, Eddie realized that all he'd heard about Christina's dedication and kindness was true. Beyond his professional curiosity, Eddie had a personal reason for wanting to learn more about Christina. For years, he had remained single, and his mother often urged him to find someone special and settle down. Eddie would lament how many people seemed to prioritize material wealth over genuine feelings and connections. For him, it wasn't about physical appearance. He was drawn to a person's inner character and values. Knowing Christina's selfless actions towards Emily deepened his intrigue and respect for her. During their lunch, Christina chuckled, and Eddie looked slightly embarrassed. "I apologize if it was overwhelming. I just thought you deserved something beautiful every day." He hesitated before adding, "Honestly, I didn't know how to approach you directly. I've never really tried to win someone over before, so I guess I went a bit overboard with the flowers as a way to show my interest," Eddie admitted. Christina shook her head in amusement. "Well, thanks to your little gesture, there's a running joke in the office that I've been sending them to myself." Eddie laughed heartily, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I guess we've given them quite the story, haven't we?" During their lunch, Christina felt the need to be open about her past. Taking a deep breath, she said, "Before things progress further, there's something I need to share with you. I was married once before." Eddie looked at her with understanding eyes and a gentle smile. "I already know about it," he replied softly. "Your past is a part of you, but it doesn't define the present. We all have stories." This made her feel even more at ease, realizing that Eddie valued who she was now rather than dwelling on what once was. Eddie and Christina began spending more time together. It wasn't formal dating, but more of a slow exploration. Having navigated the rocky terrain of a failed marriage before, Christina was wary of diving in too quickly. They decided to keep their budding relationship under wraps for the time being. With Emily recovering well, Christina felt like she was living in a dream. Everything seemed to be falling into place. However, when Eddie mentioned promoting her, she immediately declined. She didn't want to be under the office microscope or the subject of speculation. "If you need assistance, I'm here to help, but please, let's keep it discreet," she told him. This response only deepened Eddie's admiration for her. He felt he had indeed found someone genuine to stand by his side. However, secrets have a way of unraveling. One day, a colleague spotted Eddie and Christina in an intimate moment outside of work. The rumor mill went into overdrive, and whispers of their relationship began circulating the office. When Helen caught wind of the gossip, she was livid. She cornered Christina, bombarding her with a barrage of questions. Christina, maintaining her composure, said nothing. This silence confirmed Helen's suspicions. Envy consumed her, and she hatched a plan to tarnish Christina's image. She started spreading fabricated tales of Christina's past, alleging that Christina's ex-husband had left her due to financial recklessness on her part. Helen's jealousy was no secret. She had tried multiple times to ensnare Eddie with her charms, but he remained impervious. Eddie would laugh off Helen's flirty remarks and dinner invites, always citing his busy schedule as a reason. One day, Helen stormed into Eddie's office, her face flushed with anger. "I can't believe you're seriously considering a relationship with Christina. Do you even know her past?" She stormed out, leaving Eddie calm. Armed with the truth that he had painstakingly gathered, he confronted Helen. "I'm aware that Christina was married," he replied, standing up and walking toward the window. "I also know why her husband left her. He left her for another woman." Eddie paused, his eyes locking onto Helen's as he turned back around. "And that woman, Helen, was you." Helen was dumbfounded, her face a mix of shock and disbelief. She never thought her secret would be uncovered, but she had underestimated Eddie. Eddie was no novice when it came to due diligence. After speaking with Emily, he tracked down Christina's ex-husband, Stephen, and offered him a sum of money for the truth. The promise of quick cash loosened Stephen's lips, revealing the real story. The room went silent, the air heavy with the weight of the revealed secret. Helen's schemes had caught up to her, unraveling in the moment of stark revelation. Helen, once the chatterbox of the office, had retreated into the shadows. Christina always wanted to think the best of people, was concerned for her once close friend when Helen suddenly stopped coming to work. Christina felt a pang of sadness. But when she asked Eddie about Helen's abrupt departure, he shared that she had decided to move and begin anew. Amidst all of this, Christina had a significant event coming up, meeting Eddie's mother, Grace. It was an important milestone for any couple. Since Christina's parents were no longer around, she brought Emily, her former mother-in-law, with her to dinner. Grace was elegant, her years of meticulous work as an accountant giving her a sharp, attentive gaze. From the moment Christina introduced Emily, the two clicked. Both had experienced so much in life, and as the evening progressed, they exchanged stories, laughed together, and found comfort in each other's company. It was clear to Eddie and Christina that a beautiful friendship was blossoming between Emily and Grace. As Christina became more involved in Eddie's business ventures, their professional collaboration turned heads in the office. Whispers turned into open discussions, and before long, everyone knew about their romance. The two had become the most talked-about couple at the company, but this time for all the right reasons. At the office parking lot, a familiar car caught Christina's eye. The office was almost deserted, with everyone heading off to celebrate New Year's Eve with their families. As Christina was about to head home after wrapping up her final report, Eddie stepped out from behind the parked car, holding a huge bouquet of pristine white roses. "Come on, it's New Year's Eve. Work can wait," Eddie playfully chastised her, laughing. Christina replied, "I'm sorry, love. Just had that one last report to wrap up." That night, in the warmth of Eddie's home, they enjoyed an intimate dinner. During a quiet moment, Emily arose from her seat, her eyes shimmering with tears. She gazed deeply at Christina, emotion evident in her voice. I might have lost Stephen, but in his place, I gained a precious daughter and a wonderful son. Fast forward 2 months, Eddie and Christina were happily married. In another 4 months, Christina decided to resign from her job. At Eddie's gentle insistence, the couple had even more joyous news. They were expecting a baby. Christina's story was a testament to the power of resilience and kindness. Despite life's challenges, she held onto the values her parents had taught her, to always lend a helping hand and to be kind. As they said, kindness would always come back to you, sometimes even tenfold.